Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the return of Games Bond. Welcome to a delightfully relaxed and fun, hopefully, Saturday stream. That's what I'm looking to get out of this anyway. What is up, Macaw 45? With the 63 months of unspeakable horror. Very much indeed. Even though I was saying this looked bland, you still thought it looked funny and fun. Need to play it. The thing is, I feel like there's so many other games that I would probably recommend over this game right here. But it's not bad, and I thought it was remarkable the extent to which this game kind of redeemed itself in the second half. Like, it was such a marked shift in quality, I was a little taken aback. It's still kind of a weird game, but it's not terrible. It's just a little devoid of personality and flavor. But we'll look into that more as we return to the game today. We beat it last time, but we were a little short on time, so we didn't have the opportunity for the full kind of post-game completion debriefing. And there's, aside from the spreadsheet type of stuff, there's actually some more things in the game itself that I wanted to take a look at. So we'll get to that. Hello, of course, also to Icarus, Mendel, Father Axe Keeper, lurkers in chat, VOD viewers, and everybody else. What was I gonna say? Something. I forget. Whatever. Stoic Daniel Craig's just so powerful. I mean, that is funny. There's like bits of it that are pretty funny. Like in the right when the stars align, like it can be very funny. That's true. Interested in whatever 3D Bond. I rate it as S tier. Haven't seen much of the 3D Bond stuff at all. It's been pretty high quality overall, honestly. That's the thing. This is by far the least like distinctive game so far. The shooting is good, and especially in the latter half of the game, when the game actually like makes use of the good mechanics by providing like a decent challenge and enemies that start flanking you and like having to worry a little bit about ammo management and like actually wanting to make use of explosive barrels and stuff, like sort of strategically. Like the game just gets a lot better, but there's nothing about it that feels like a Bond game, or you know, it's good in a way that doesn't, you know, it's not elevated by the license in any particular way, but it's also not like elevating the license. Like, how do I put it? Like, it's a mutually unbeneficial relationship between the game mechanics and the license in those particular aspects. It's good and fun in a way that I could imagine the Call of Duty games that they were developing at the same time are, to the exact same degree and in the exact same way. And as far as like the setting and the characters providing something that feels more interesting than army guys fighting in war, I mean, it's not there, but it's not there to any great extent. And especially coming off of a decade of different developers doing their own take on like the Bond first-person shooter in different interesting ways, I feel like. But you will get an opportunity to look at the tier list quite briefly, because that is one of the things that we will get to today. We're going to be booting up the game. We're going to be looking at the multiplayer menu just to see if there is any kind of is there anything for us to do as a solo player there? I don't know exactly the status of whether I would be able to connect to anything to actually play other people online, or even hop into an empty server or something. I don't know. I don't know if there's like bots. I'd be curious just to see like a list of options and maps and whatever we can explore in the multiplayer part of the game. We're also going to look at the achievements, because I didn't get to do that last time, and they were kind of popping at confusing times. So I'm just curious to kind of take a look at that. We're also going to look at the there's like an interesting little bonus thing, which is really strange for a 2008 game, where there's this like mid 90s Windows 95 style virtual Q branch lab that you walk around in to look at your unlocked concept art and 3D models, which is like simultaneously cool and really stupid and weird. But we're gonna have to take a look at it for sure. There's like the one aspect of exploration and collecting in the game where you find all these Sony Ericsson mobile phones, and I think those are probably just to give you like hints at things that you can do in the level or like upcoming obstacles or whatever. But presumably there's an achievement. I think we got one when I collected a phone, which seemed to imply that, yeah, probably for getting X number of phones over the course of the game, you can get achievements. But I don't think the phones or any other like aspect of the player's performance in each of the levels has any connection to unlocking bonus materials or anything. But that's kind of why I want to take a look at the achievements to see if that can clarify some of those things. The manual doesn't explain jack shit. The manual is like a flimsy black and white pamphlet that's like 8 pages, half of which is like legal text in the Activision hint line, and then notes. And the only actual content in the manual is like, oh, here's how to connect your ISP for internet, and visit Microsoft website to learn more about Xbox Live. And here are the controls. That's like the entire manual. And I mean, if they're going to put that little effort into them, I can see why they stopped making manuals, I guess. Has there been any 3D Bond where Bond isn't a Rambo? I wouldn't say that there's been one where he isn't. But most 3D Bond games feature segments where he is not. Even this one, sort of, very briefly, has parts where you're supposed to sneak around and you don't have a gun on screen, like, pointing. But Everything or Nothing, I would say, is by far the one that has, like, the most variety and the most kind of different scenarios. Not only does it have, like, shooting and punching and driving and whatever, it also has levels that are a little bit open-ended, and some of which the kind of, you know, they have like secret puzzly adventure-y type things to find in a sense. But most of them have like at least some level or some segments where you're supposed to, it's not necessarily like stealth levels, but levels where you like walk around, maybe talk to people, maybe there's like the in The World's Not Enough, there's a part where you like infiltrate the nuclear research underground thing, where you have to like talk to people and get a fake ID or whatever. So there's usually like some little element of that, and those kinds of elements being, for all intents and purposes, completely absent in Quantum of Solace is exactly the kind of thing that makes me feel like it's a kind of subpar experience in that sense. But I don't think there's even, like, for as long as technology has allowed it, pretty much every Bond game has at least elements of complete guns blazing, just, you know, shoot everything and everyone sort of situations. But I mean, even GoldenEye has a bunch of stages where there's like a stealth element, and if you trigger the alarm, you get like 5,000 enemies. So you want to avoid that. But at the same time, of course, a large chunk of the game is literally just running around shooting. So you got a little bit more of that, like that balance. And I understand why you would ask the question that way, not just because I guess you were less familiar with the 3D games, but before those, like in the pre-GoldenEye era of Bond games, for both technical reasons, I suppose, there wasn't as much of a like full-on Contra, just run and gun attitude to the games. But you got more, you know, there's a point-and-click adventure game, there's the text adventure games, and even the kind of action-y games weren't always that degree of action. So they're a little more restrained, I guess you could say. But that's a big reason why I'm super excited for IO Interactive's upcoming Bond game, because I think we'll get more of that balance, and I think I'm sure it will have big action, but I expect the balance to be quite different. Like in these, like in Everything or Nothing, or in World's Not Enough, or GoldenEye, or any of those games, at their core, they're shooting games. They're action games that have non-shooting segments to kind of spice things up and to show a different side of the character in the world of Bond. But those, you know, you still have a feeling of what the kind of main gameplay is, and then you have some sort of detours and divergences from that. Whereas I would expect IOI's Bond game to feel much more like the main, like the core gameplay isn't action, it isn't shooting, it's more adventure-y, puzzly, sneaking around, social stealth, like that kind of stuff, with bits of driving and bits of shooting and bits of punching, and like a little closer to what you would expect from a film. I think a good point of comparison would be the Machine Games Indiana Jones game, which has a first-person camera perspective, but it's not only is it not a first-person shooter, I would kind of almost go so far as to say it's not a first-person action game. Like, it's a first-person adventure game. It has action in it, but it has jumping and climbing and exploring and talking and like doing quests for people and collecting stuff. Like, it's an awesome game, and part of what makes it really fun and cool is that though it has action in it, the action really is just a small part of it. The much greater part of it is like exploration and just kind of being in that world and interacting with characters. And like in typical Machine Games fashion, the dialogue and the story stuff is really pretty compelling. And I think IO is pretty good at that kind of stuff as well, albeit in a different way. So I expect that stuff to be a bigger part, because really I think if any part of the Bond experience has been kind of undercooked in game adaptations historically, it's that kind of social interaction, or just like you know, Bond as a character interacting with other characters, not just in like dialogue and cutscene, but like as part of the game. Like, if you think of Bond, yes, he can be a, you know, blunt instrument, and he can be a stone cold killer, and he can be a exceptional driver and whatever else. But a lot of what he does is, you know, interacting with people, talking with people, getting information out of people, and that hasn't really been like gamified much historically. And I think his personality and his charms and his sort of just what he is like as a person and as a character, or at least the image he can present of himself, is such a huge part of the character that you kind of accept that that's not a huge thing, because it is like just inherently a difficult thing to gamify compared to shooting a gun. So you kind of, I think, accept that you don't necessarily feel like Bond, or at least you only feel like parts of Bond. Like, in a well-made Bond game, you feel like when you are doing cool action shit, you feel like Bond when he is doing cool action shit, but you don't really get the opportunity to feel like you are Bond doing so many other things. And I think those kinds of things are some of what IO Interactive really excel at. So, like, that's the kind of stuff that makes me excited to see them do their take on James Bond. It's not because they, like, oh, they're so good at making games where you're this murderer, where you elaborately kill billionaires. That's perfect for Bond. Like, I mean, yeah, sure, fine. That's like, you know, it doesn't hurt. But it's not like the action set pieces of Hitman are what get me excited about the same people making a Bond game. It's much more the mechanical intricacies of the design of Hitman, which I don't expect the mechanics to transfer one-to-one, but I think the approach to design is a very good fit. But generally, like, 47 as a character and his interaction with people is like really funny and like smart and good. Like, I don't know, like the Hitman trilogy, the recent games are like, on the one hand, the story itself, the plot is like whatever. Couldn't give less of a shit. I couldn't really tell you what it's about. But in the moment, like when you have the mission and when you see how like the information you get throughout a mission about a person and like the revelation and just the delivery of the story stuff and the narrative and even just the world building and the characters interacting, like that stuff is super well done and quite compelling. And I think that would also translate really, really well to Bond, but also kind of this spy intrigue drama kind of stuff in general. What's up, Yo-Yu? Guy Rush, greetings. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like you're saying, Father Axe Keeper, like Hitman games aren't really actiony, so there's so many parts of the Bond formula that just are either completely absent in Hitman, or as you say, they're there, but they're not really, like, yes, you can engage in shootouts, but you probably shouldn't. And the games aren't really, like, 47 doesn't really feel like a, you know, if you imagine what a cool shootout is in a movie, like 47 isn't that. Well, except maybe in the actual Hitman movies where he does fucking dumbass Matrix shit. I don't know. But at least in the current Hitman games, like, sure, he's a good shot, but sort of by his own admission, if he found himself in an actual firefight, he would probably say that he fucked up, you know? And that's not really true for Bond, not in the same way anyway. But even just like the whole Bond being in peril, right? There's like always this thing where he gets caught and he has to like get himself out of impossible situations, which I feel like the mechanics of Hitman, or at least like that general approach to game design, could really lend itself well to those kinds of scenarios where they're like, I think that's super exciting. The idea of this systemic kind of approach to not just, oh, you're in this specific situation, oh, this is the part where you have to use your laser watch to break this chain to free yourself from this torture device or whatever. Like, I mean, sure, that can be part of the game, but it'd be so cool if there could be stuff like that that's more emergent, that's more systemic as opposed to just fully scripted. But the game gives you the tools to like interact with those situations in interesting ways, but also gives the world the ability to react to those kind of, like, to create those situations and also react to you breaking out of those situations. I think stuff like that could be super fascinating and could be like a sort of a different twist to the kinds of mechanics and interactions you see in Hitman, but in totally different types of scenarios. What's up, Grim Fandango? Greetings. Let me hydrate the classic strong. This is does this have a flavor? I don't know. Doesn't say. Just Colossus energy drink, 0 calories, 0 sugar, so it must be good for me. How that works, right? But yeah, very excited for iOS Hitman, and frankly, my biggest concern about the game is that they will show it and release it too quickly, so I don't have time to finish the other games first, because I feel very... I feel obligated to obviously play the games that I've set out to play. I feel obligated to play the new game when it comes out, although I'm of course also personally just excited to play it. But I also feel obligated to maintain the chronological structure, meaning if this comes out, I will want to have finished everything else before we get there. So on that note, why don't we hop into the action and take a final look at Quantum of Solace for the Xbox 360. There has been no announcements about the release date of the game yet. No. Um, there's been like 2 trailers of sorts. There's been, well, I say trailers, but I mean it feels more like acknowledgements of the game. The game was first formally announced, I want to say, in maybe 2021, something like that, with like a teaser trailer that showed like a gun barrel kind of thing. In the interim, it might have been even earlier than that, I don't know, it was a good couple of years ago. They have, of course, acknowledged it in other ways without like media, but you know, they've mentioned that the character of Bond, like at this point it wouldn't be relevant, but at the time I guess there might have been questions whether it would feature Daniel Craig or whatever. But basically, long story short, is as far as likeness, as far as continuity, as far as any of those things, like Bond in that game is not tied to the films directly. Like, it won't use the same actor as any of the films, it won't like be based on films, etc. And I reckon it's probably not going to be a one-off thing, or at least I'm sure they hope for it to be more than one game. So presumably it will be their kind of Bond who, like, I want to say, and I could be wrong about this, but I want to say that there has been word that it's supposed to be like, I don't know if that it's like Bond at the beginning of his career or whatever, but it's like we should probably expect a slightly younger Bond. And that makes sense too if we imagine that it's like an actor and a character that we, you know, might get like a you know, a good couple of games. And especially, I mean, you can look at Hitman 2 as a potential template, right? Where if they have the ability to construct something where they can make sequels, you know, more easily by using a framework with new content, and, you know, you could get a second Bond game in 2 or 3 years instead of like 7 years, that'd be pretty good for everyone involved, I would imagine. But that's like the only thing really that's been said. Like, nothing else has been said about anything. And the only other time really it's been acknowledged was about a month ago, a couple of weeks ago, at the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal thing, where they basically announced that, oh yeah, Bond's gonna come to Switch 2, and Hitman 3's coming to Switch 2, and like that's the extent of it. But no date, no nothing. Anyway, let's quickly recap. Let's see if I can find the buttons. There we go.
What have you got there? A box?
Why not 79? Insisting on some box art review before we get going. That's fine. We'll get to that. We'll do that, sure. Give me a second. So, if you missed it, we finished this game last time, but we were a little bit rushed for time, so we have some follow-up debriefing type stuff to do, and potentially we might muck around a little bit more in the game, but I'm not going to run the timer or anything. Like, this is kind of a bonus post-game looking at stuff, more or less. But while we're or rather when we are done with that, we will be advancing to the PS2 version developed by Eurocom. And I was able to, I didn't play anything, but I was able to at least get the game up and running yesterday, so hopefully we won't come across any other kind of technical issues. But we'll see. So according to this blurb, it's like an adaptation of the other game. And I saw like 2 seconds of an like sizzle reel opening FMV that seemed to imply that it has like kind of the same levels, or at least some of them, which is unsurprising. The levels are all based on like set piece moments in the film for the most part, so, or the films plural, I guess, because it's half of it, actually 2/3 of it is Casino Royale. But that's gonna be exciting. Trying to interrupt while I'm speaking, well, I mean, that's gonna be tough because I never shut up. So, I mean, I wouldn't worry about that. That's not a big deal as far as I'm concerned. But before we hop into the action, we'll take one quick detour to look at some box arts. Give me a moment here to just prepare this. Nope, that's not what I meant to click. Go. So, let's take a look at Circuit's Edge by Infocom. This is not a game I'm familiar with. By Westwood Associates. Looks pretty intriguing. I think the guy looks a little, I don't know, it doesn't look super cool, but cool concept. I'm trying to see what we're looking at. Like, there's some kind of a Middle Eastern location, I guess. A guy in his finest Don Johnson white blazer, brandishing a gun. I mean, even those shades themselves are pretty sick. This is definitely a game I'm immediately intrigued to turn the box over to see what it's about, as it looks fascinating. I'm also realizing, I mean, I guess I knew that, but hadn't really reflected on the fact that I really am not particularly well versed in Westwood's output. Like, when I think of Westwood, I basically just think of Command and Conquer, and they made like The Lion King. I know they made the Carandia games, but I've never played those, so I don't really know much about them. But I guess they became a Command and Conquer factory once that like popped off. But I would imagine, as was probably the case for most like PC game developers in the 80s and early 90s, that they had a pretty broad, or at least more broad, range of stuff that they made. Yeah, that's true. The Command and Conquer box is pretty similar to this, but I think it's interesting because on the one hand, Command and Conquer's box is like way slicker and like it feels so much more like modern and exciting and cool or whatever. But I find this like so much more compelling, partially because of its, I don't want to call it lack of slickness, but like the particular flavor of slickness. Like, there's something, I mean, the fact that it's like hand painted and it's a little more analog, it's a little more it's hard for me to find the words for it, but it's like, you know, there's that human degree of imperfection that just makes it kind of more compelling in some fashion. Yeah, Dune, I mean, that's pretty much I mean, they made Dune 2000 as well, right? Like, Dune 2 is basically Command and Conquer like 0.5. And I guess it does sound vaguely familiar that you mentioned Young Merlin, but yeah, that's the exact thing I'm talking about. Like, it's a familiar name, and I'm sure they had a lot of games, but seeing something like this, and I'm like, wow, all right, that's interesting. And it's like, well, I guess of course they would have put out a bunch of stuff that I didn't really know about, because it's not like they just showed up out of nowhere and released Command and Conquer. And I think that's pretty true for many developers who would go on to be defined by a particular game or a particular genre. Like, just in general, just the scope of game development was such that comparing even like 1992 to 1996, like, you might have companies that put out like 5 games in completely different genres in 92, and then in 96 they put out like the second sequel to the thing that was the only thing they'd ever did after that. But anyway, we're not here to discuss the oeuvre of Westwood. We're here to talk about the box for Circuit's Edge, which is a game I feel compelled to research because it's I don't know, I feel like from what little I do know, like, I would imagine Westwood stuff to hold a pretty decent bar of quality, you know? So something that's got this kind of box art and, I don't know, a sci-fi first-person adventure with light RPG elements it doesn't necessarily sound like it's perfectly up my alley, but it's something I'm intrigued to investigate. Yeah, like I said, there's a few elements of this that are like ever so slightly dopey. It's a little bit confusing to imagine, like, if what we're seeing in his shades are an actual reflection, where is this person located that he is, like, in the dark, but also seeing reflection of this bright, sunny location? I don't know. That's a little puzzling. You know, an artistic touch, sure, whatever, it doesn't matter. I think this is really cool. I like it a lot. I don't know that it's like a fully super mega fantastic box that I'm really in love with, but I find it quite intriguing, and I think it's clearly well painted. Maybe if I could infer something more about like the emotion or indeed what's even going on, or like even if there was like a mystery to it, which I guess there is to a degree, but it's like if there was some more kind of intention behind, or you know, that came across behind what we're seeing and who this character is, or what's going on, maybe that would push it over the edge. I like it, but I think it's gonna top out at 4 stars. I think it's a pretty dang good box though. I like it. So next up, take a look at Zoids. The battle begins for the MSX. Well, I don't know what to make of this, really. I will say that the word Zoids is familiar to me in the sense that I like have seen it or heard it, but I have absolutely zero connection to whatever it is. I would imagine that it's like some localized Japanese thing from the 80s. I mean, you got the Tomy logo there and everything. Certainly looks like a drawing of a Japanese 80s robot toy. But I have no idea if it's some kind of Robotech westernized version, or if it's a, Transformers type situation, or something else entirely. Not familiar at all. But yeah, I don't know. This is a little bit of a mess, I think. Like, it doesn't... Like, that's the thing. I bring up these things, talking about these, like, kind of hokey, weird localizations of, whether it's a cartoon or a toy line or whatever it is, where it's, like, handled by someone who doesn't quite understand or respect what it is or where it came from, who then, license it to someone else to make a product out of it, who then hires someone else to make a drawing out of it, and you end up something that's like a couple of steps removed from whatever it was originally, which isn't to say that you've lost all the appeal for the target audience necessarily, but with a couple of decades of hindsight, it's also this kind of element of cool Japanese shit getting, which I don't know if this is, it's just that's how it comes across, but it's like there's so many instances of whether it's toys or video games or comic books or film or cartoons or whatever it is, where you get these weird interpretations of them that are not only are they kind of removed from what they originally were, but they kind of morph into something else. And if I'm like not familiar with either, Macross or Robotech or whatever the equivalent would be, I'm just like not entirely sure what to make of it. I could see this being a thing that some people would go, hell yeah, this is so sick, I love, toy robot shit or whatever. And it's not like awful or anything, but that kind of aspect doesn't really do much for me, because it's not something I'm like, just the subject matter isn't something I'm super into. I also find it to be a little bit of a mess in the sense that, like, the logo is really weird, the colors blending in and everything, this big battle begins splash that's like sticking up more than anything, the contrast levels of the drawing and the weird like foreground explosion. There's some kind of, I don't know if it's a desert in the background, if it's an orange ocean, and then there's like trees or volcanoes or something in the back. I don't know. I find it to be a little bit of a mess. And I'm not like, if I was looking at this on a cassette tape case, like, I'd make even less sense out of it, I think. So like I don't think it's awful or anything. I don't think it's like terribly painted, but I think it's the composition is very cramped and awkward. Like if you are familiar with Zoids, I guess you could probably make out that there's a Zoid on this box. But I don't really understand what we're looking at beyond that. I don't really know what the scene is. I don't know what the supposed battle is. I can barely read the logo. I would say not strictly on the merit of the illustration's technical quality, but more so everything else and how it's all coming together. I feel like this is a bit of a mess of a cover. And so it's not really an indictment of the subject matter or the theme or even the composition of the illustration, but just the way it's like overlaid with all this other stuff and it's sort of cut off, and like it ends up for me being not a very good cover because I can't really make heads or tails of it. When you look at the actual game, it's also hard to figure out. I mean, I wouldn't expect that to be a deliberate artistic choice, but let's call it a little bit of serendipity. But at the end of the day, like for me, this is just too much of a mess to be too impressed with or too engaged by. So I'm gonna say that's a 2-star cover. It's just a little bit too much of a mess. But there you go. That's Zoids. The battle begins for the MSX. All right. That was it, right? Yeah. Well, with that, let's us return to the matters at hand and play some Games Bond. Let's hop on back here. I love this, by the way. I happened to catch this out as I was setting up the description of the game, saying that it follows closely the story of the films, but elaborates many scenes and fills in some blanks, which is very funny given that the game actually like skips pretty serious swaths of the films. And it's certainly like, okay, you might say that it fills in blanks in the sense that a scene that's like a brief encounter in the film is preceded by like 10 minutes of shooting in the game, but that's not really filling in like when you watch the movie, that's not like, oh man, I wonder if there was 10 minutes of shooting before this.
What have you got there? A box?
But as far as like the kinds of blanks you would actually want filled in, which is like what the fuck's going on in the story, not only does the game not provide any additional information there, it even skips and like it's like even less comprehensible than the film. So I've found that to be a very funny way of phrasing that. But we're not getting that just yet, I suppose. McCall 45 has another review for us. Let's take a look at that. I'm sure you spent 15 minutes feverishly finding that while I was reviewing the other thing, so I wouldn't want to rob you of the opportunity to talk about that. Or to listen to me talk about it, rather. Where's my thing? The button I'm looking for? There we go. Let's take a look at Farah and Giliora. The PC Engine CD-ROM. There's a subtitle there? What does it say? The Emblem from Darkness? Is that what that says? See aside this shit. Yeah, the Emblem from Darkness. Farah and Giliora. The Emblem from Darkness. So yeah. Yeah, this is pretty fucking sick. We've got some like Noriyoshi Orai style exploding hydras in the back. We've got space cliffs, space mountains, space fog. And we've got some like fantasy warrior babes. But it's actually kind of cool because it's stylistically I find it really interesting. Because it is, I feel like it's a little bit of a, it's like a blending of different things. Like, because you clearly got this like Orai style movie poster-esque like Godzilla monster stuff, and even the way the characters are painted kind of is more in that tradition, right? Because you've got that element, but you've also like, you could draw parallels to other kind of fantasy paintings, in the style of Vallejo and like that kind of stuff. But the actual character designs feel like they're quite, like, I would imagine that the game looks nothing like this. And the actual character designs feel like far more typical. Well, I shouldn't say more typical, because they're both like very typical things, but it's a style of character design that isn't usually depicted in this kind of illustration style. Like, this feels like the much more typical like manga fantasy character design that you see in like 8 million different things. And I'm sure it's not like extremely, like, it's not the first or last time you saw these kinds of designs painted in this kind of style. And I wouldn't describe it as like a clash or anything, but it's like an interesting... I feel like on the PC Engine alone, you probably have a couple of dozen games with characters like this, and they wouldn't typically be illustrated in this sort of style. So I find this like super duper compelling, because I actually like both. I like the Fiend Hunter, Lodos War, Langrisser, like that style of like super anime fantasy stuff. But of course I love the traditional fantasy painting stuff and like the sci-fi tokusatsu shit as well. Like, so it's actually a pretty intriguing melding of a lot of different things that feel simultaneously like quite separate, but also they fit together really well. I feel like I gotta give them a little bit of shit for the logo being kind of unreadable, and the composition of the typography relative to the illustration is quite strange. Like, I don't know if it quite feels like even the composition of the illustration was really meant for this layout. I don't know. Like, it would seem conceivable to me that there is a wraparound for like the back of the manual that makes the composition make a little more sense. But this is still extremely fucking cool and definitely up my alley as far as subject matter and style. So I mean, relative to the Circuit's Edge box, this is definitely more, I want to not only look at the back of the box, I want to play this, and also, I could do it without the typography maybe, but aside from that, I would happily have this on a poster on my wall. But for me, I think this is a 5-star box. This is pretty sick. So there you go. That's Afera and Giliora. I'm gonna have to look this up. Like, I have so many gigantic blind spots as far as the PC Engine library goes, and it's been a long time, but I used to every now and again do these streams just playing a bunch of random PC Engine stuff to just kind of explore the library and familiarize myself. And I wouldn't expect this to be a game that I would fall in love with or anything. But with art like this, at the very least would like to have seen the game to get a sense of what it's like. All right, that's it. Now it's Bond time. Let's see. Do that, and game going. Let's fade out the jams. Play here so I can actually see the game. Correct. Oh, I guess. There we go. Take 3 minutes to start the console. So yeah, there's like 3 main orders of business. We're going to investigate the multiplayer situation. We're going to look at the achievements, and we're going to investigate the whatchamacallits, the bonus material Q lab type stuff.
Gigabond.
Thank you very much, Space Opera Copter. Appreciate that. Oh, wait. Yeah, audio levels are going to be a bit all over the place. I think the corporate logos here are going to be extremely loud. And then it's going to, I don't know, load my settings and not be as loud, hopefully. So let's go in here first. Yeah, so we so field operative was the difficulty. I forgot because I entered this in my spreadsheet. I couldn't remember the name of the difficulty level because I knew it was different from the earlier games. Field operative, the medium difficulty. That's what we cleared the game on. So there's unlockables. The videos are literally like, it says bonus video, but it's really just like the briefing video opening to each level. So it really feels like they're kind of okay, yeah, so this is like the weird cliffhanger ending. Yeah, I think this was like the post-credits scene. They're making it seem like there's some interesting bonus stuff here, but like, no, this is literally just... I mean, I don't mind that they give me the option to rewatch them, separate from playing the mission. I think that's good. But if you think of a 2008 video game that has like unlockable bonus stuff, and it's like videos, like you would expect something maybe a little more interesting than this. Or at least something we didn't see in the course of playing through the game. The MI6 debriefing rooms, those are the weird multimedia rooms. But before I forget it, we're gonna look at the achievements, and this is kind of interesting too, that like there aren't any. This was not something that was entirely consistent on Xbox, and especially for multi-platform games. They wouldn't necessarily bake this into the systems, like the games menus itself. Some games would, especially Xbox Live Arcade games, but not always. And when they do it, like I just kind of forget that it's a thing. But so we have to go to the system level achievements menu here. Yeah, so right, okay, so we got these Chivos at the same time because we beat the game on Field Operative, so we got the Chivo for New Recruit as well. Hack all locks. Okay, so I guess we found every locked door in the game. Yeah, so Eco Hotel is the final level, so I guess at least that one level has a Chivo for just clearing that level. But otherwise, I think complete Barge in Venice. In Venice, defeat Gettler with one shot. Oh, is this... Wait. I guess that would be the nail gun thing at the very end. I don't remember any other particular character or scene that would be noteworthy enough. In Barge, save Vesper in under 2 minutes. Okay, I guess they have like Casino Poison. It's a funny level name. There's like achievements for clearing sets of levels. But also these little actual Bond move type things. 50 enemies with one shot. I mean, that's a cool, like, that will just happen because enemies actually just die easily in this game, which is one of the best parts about it. Shooting people actually feels really good. Take down 50 enemies. Okay, yeah, right. Science Center. Okay, it's so weird. Like, you would just expect them to have like one per level, but no, you just gotta complete like 3 levels to get one achievement. Beat an enemy with one shot. Okay, so those are all the ones we got. You know, now I'm actually like seeing here that some of them are actually like kind of interesting challenges, interesting things to do. That gives me the impression, the sneaking suspicion, if you will, that oh yeah, I guess I did play this in 2019 to when I first bought it, fucking 5 years ago. 6 years ago. That's how long James Bond has been in the works, by the way, because I would keep buying these games with the plan to eventually play a bunch of Bond games, but I would have just played it to make sure it worked or whatever. I guess I cleared the first level. It's interesting. So it doesn't even have dates on this, but that might have just been because we were offline when we played it. I'm not sure. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. But what I was going to say is, because some of these are actually interesting, that gives me the suspicion that the ones we didn't collect yet might also have some interesting things, which I wouldn't do it now, but might actually give this game a little bit more replay value to actually replay levels to try to get specific achievements, which actually addresses one of the complaints that I had, which is most previous 3D Bond games have some kind, or at least the the PS2 games onward, have this kind of Bond move mechanic where there's like Bond moves or Bond moments, like specific actions you can perform in each level that create like these specific sort of situations or big payoffs, or just doing cool stunts and that kind of thing. And typically it would be gamified so that you actually get like a specific bonus for doing them, or like in Everything or Nothing there's like a specific number of them in each level. You can get like sort of hints to what you can do to complete them, and if you do that, I forget if you just get a higher level score. You do get a bonus for it for sure, but I forget if there's like a separate thing that sort of checks how many of those you have found and collected. And that's completely absent in this game. But I guess what they did was sort of put it in the achievement system. Interesting. Disable 10 cameras. I'm surprised we didn't actually get that, because I feel like we would have... That was such a recurring mechanic, but I'm probably relatively close to getting this one. Yeah, and Sienna, shoot all 7 satellite dishes on the rooftop. So this is cool. Like, I wouldn't even have noticed that was a thing, but it's a thing you can do. So like, it would create for sure like incentive to actually go back and replay levels to try to notice these things and engage with them. That's good. Move through backstage without alerting the guards. That's not as fun of a thing to redo, in my opinion. But yeah, I guess there's probably like at least one of these things per level, because we got the one here in White's Estate, and this is in Sienna, and then Opera House, and then Sinkhole. Like, yeah, that's cool. But yeah, this like the stealth one, nah, not that exciting. Kill the helicopter pilot while the gunners are still alive. Cool. I definitely didn't do that. Beat each sniper guard with 1 shot. That would actually be like, that's right at the beginning of the level, so it would be kind of relatively easy to grind for, I think. Shoot down all the lights in the main hall. Half monk, half hitman. Okay. Save the Skyfleet servers without breaking stealth. Yeah, I don't know about the stealth, Chivos. In train, only use the P99 while on the freight train, huh? Reach the spa room without alerting or attacking the guards. Where's the fun in that? Hotel kill. Oh, that's gonna be in the beginning, where there's like this. You're supposed to infiltrate via this like parking garage, and as you walk up to the door, it just opens and this car comes careening out at you, and you get the mission objective to like avoid getting hit by car. And it's like, yeah, I was gonna do that anyway, but I guess you can kill the driver. Collect all cell phones. Okay, we didn't get this one. We got one for what? Collecting 30, I think. Yeah, collect 30 cell phones. Collect all power weapons. What the hell is a power weapon? Complete game on Agent 007. Yeah. Unlock and purchase all weapons. Is this a multiplayer thing? Like unlock. I finished the game, and I have no awareness of unlocking nor purchasing weapons as mechanics. So that's a little confusing. Yeah, this has to be multiplayer shit. Yeah, I mean, gadgets aren't like in the game. In the single player game. Weapon attachments, golden weapons. Use a bomb in Bond versus, yeah. Credits. I guess the credits are how you unlock stuff in multiplayer. Yeah, there's like, it's so weird that they don't I guess it's not weird, but it's confusing that they don't actually they don't specify that they're like which are for online. Yeah, but I mean, it's like half the achievements are online, which isn't super unusual, but it is a little unusual, or at least, well, I don't know. When Call of Duty 4 came out, Modern Warfare, I was very impressed and happy with how they did it in that game, because obviously online play was a thing, and many games, you know, had a lot of achievements connected to the online stuff, and I always found that a little bothersome and annoying because, you know, you end up with a lot of achievements that are impossible to get after the fact, even if the game's technically up and running, when it's like, oh, play 100 matches, or like a bunch of shit that's like gonna be borderline impossible if you have to like manually connect with other players to go into matches specifically to get these achievements or whatever. But Modern Warfare surprisingly, kind of boldly, took the approach of not having a single achievement in the game that's tied to the multiplayer, but instead, of course, that was like kind of the first game to have a, I mean, maybe not the first in the world, but certainly the game that popularized having like progression in the online multiplayer. Like you gain XP and you unlock stuff, so it had its own ecosystem of rewards within the game itself, and it had like, it left the achievement stuff entirely for the single player campaign. And I kind of always felt like, man, I really would wish that that's how every game did it. I feel like, I mean, the only kind of games that I buy and play that are the equivalent to this nowadays, I feel like, are fighting games that have like an offline and online components, and that are like big releases with full sets of achievements, etc. And those, for the most part nowadays, are very like, they have a, like Street Fighter games. I haven't really looked too much at the Chivos in Fatal Fury yet, but like KOF and stuff, like they usually have a handful of sort of token online Chivos. They might have one for like playing 100 games online, and they have some for like reaching a gold rank or something like that. Some that aren't necessarily trivial to get, but usually it's like, here's an achievement for having interacted with this one mode once, and there's like 7 modes that no one's ever gonna touch, but you can just pop in there once to get the achievement and peace out. As opposed to this, like, I don't know, this seems like if you were playing this a lot, you could get all these with no problem, but it'll take a little while. But again, like, you kind of get half a set of Chivos for people who are interested in the single player game, and half a set for people who are interested in multiplayer games. And I don't know the odds of someone being about equally interested in both, like enough to want to get the full set of Chivos, unless you're specifically just a Chivo sicko. I mean, there's plenty of those around. Anyway, the thing about achievements is that, like, Dead Rising kind of nailed it in 2006, and then, like, I guess, you know, giving credit where credit's due, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare did a good job with them too. But then, like, before and after, there's like countless examples of games that just did a really poor job with designing achievements. Anyway, let's take a look at the MI6 debriefing rooms. So to my knowledge, when I looked at this briefly at the end of the first stream, yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any degree of like unlocking more or less items or anything. It's just like after you beat a set of levels, it unlocks this. And again, this is such a strange, like, unusual way of doing this stuff. Even just this, you pick this off the menu and it shows you this black screen, and then it says skip. It's not like start or advance, it's skip. So I can press the A button to skip this static black screen. And then it, like, what was that sequence for? Like, what was that screen there? It's so strange. Like, why didn't it just go into this?
Report to the mission briefing room.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about this part. We're being yelled at by M. I mean, this is kind of neat, and of course, this isn't really something we see at all in the movies. I don't recall. It's been a while since I watched Casino Royale. But I don't really recall the MI6 offices like being really a part of the movie, much less this. You know, this isn't technically billed as Q branch, but it certainly got that kind of laboratory vibe. I can pause and turn on weapon and item displays. Now, I'm always a huge fan of having like 3D model viewers and galleries and stuff like that in games. Like having ways to just appreciate and inspect all these different art assets, I think is awesome. Getting insight into the development process and seeing like and seeing you know,
007, report to the armory.
okay, you know, seeing these bits and pieces of art and you know, development materials is great. I love seeing that stuff. And you know, like, I don't want to complain because the effort being put into creating this kind of environment to walk around in is neat, but it's such a strange way to do this. Like, if I wanted to look at the weapons, I would have much preferred having, you know, a menu where I pick a weapon and then I can, you know, rotate the 3D model freely and look at it, as opposed to having to walk around this space. To say nothing of these like storyboards, having to like walk around in 3D. Like, this is what's giving me those like Windows 95 flashbacks of walking around these Wolfenstein-esque hallways to launch into a game of Pac-Man or whatever. Like, it's odd. I think this is supposed to be Mr. White, right? Doesn't actually tell us.
007, report to the mission
Yes,
briefing
I know. I will. It's also funny that because these guys are like on these little pedestals, I have to like look up at them. Goofy. But yeah, so that is a character from the films, but they did not get that particular actor's likeness, so he doesn't look or sound anything. Look inside. Oh, this is kind of neat. Because there's no actual driving in this game. There's like a CG cutscene that kind of the swooshing noise that kind of recreates the car chase from the beginning, the opening scene of Quantum of Solace. That's about it. Use smart wall display. Like, this is such a why do I have to look at this art in a 3D space in a glass table with a gigantic fucking glare? Like, it's, you know,
007, report to the armory.
it's kind of cool, but it's also like just a terrible way to actually present and have me interacting with this, like, this media, this content. Concept art for the interior White's estate. This is an expanded version of the estate seen briefly at the end of the film Casino Royale when Bond confronts Mr. White. That's okay, and I guess that makes sense, because yeah, the films are like very directly linked, and this scene in the game leads to like the capture of Mr. White, which is like kind of what the car chase I just mentioned is sort of about. But I didn't remember that the estate itself, like, and the whole end of Casino Royale is kind of weird. I didn't really remember that he actually goes to his estate and find him and like capture him or whatever. But that is indeed the very, very end of Casino Royale. Similar, but not identical.
007, report to the mission briefing room.
Who would thought that this was a good idea? Just having Judi Dench just yell at us. Car chase between White's estate and Sienna. Like the opening CG cutscene here or whatever. Yeah, I'm already lost because everything looks identical, but I guess it's... Okay, yeah, so we came from here. Is there anything more here? I'm gonna guess no. I think this room was just for White's estate. Yeah. Here's the debriefing for Sienna, Opera House, and Sinkhole. Which is pretty funny because Sinkhole, that's the level like where after you crash with the plane when you fly there with what's her name, Camille, and that's like leading into the ending of the film. And that's like yeah, let's do all that in once, and then there's like 5 parts of Casino Royale in the middle. Oh yeah, let me skip that. MI6 debriefing, Quantum Part 1. I'm curious, like,
report to the mission briefing room.
I have to report to stuff constantly. This is just like the car garage room where they'll have a car and some other... I guess like the room itself is the exact same. It's just like a little bit different what's on the whiteboards or whatever. I guess this is Bond. Ah! This seems like it's not quite centered the way it should be. Yeah, Game Boy Bond obviously had the superior Q branch, but it kind of has the superior everything compared to most games. What's his name? Green. Pretty good likeness. I mean, I don't know about that. Well, I was gonna say I don't know about that death stare. That's not too off. So I get, yeah, I guess this is like that. I was gonna say the clock tower fight. It's not exactly a clock tower, whatever it is. The rifle. Little toys. You will be rewarded for taking down the chopper at the end of Sinkhole with the side gunner still on board. So it's actually giving us a little bit of a hint for the Chivo. That's kind of cool. A little weird, but cool. So I guess this is, what's his name? The guy who was like M's bodyguard, who turned out to be a secret villain. I don't know what's going on with like the lighting. Yeah, like when I activate or deactivate the character display, like the... going on with the lamps in here. Mitchell? Sure. It's just really creepy. So these guys are just like mannequins or whatever, right? They don't move. They're just like wax puppets. You know, maybe they're holograms or whatever, right? You know, we had fucking holographic Renard or whatever his name was in The World's Not Enough, right? They have the technology. But then you have Olga Kurylenko over here who's like looking bored and actually moving around. That's like 5 times more creepy. Like staring off the ceiling. Even she's like way taller than me. I can stop her spinning, but she's like... Now she's just a person standing here. It's really kind of weird. Pretty good likeness. Like, pretty alright. Hair actually looks surprisingly good, to be honest. For 2008 hair. I'm trying to look at the hair, but it's hard to move around this fucking thing. And then she's like spinning. And the fucking lighting is all... Oh, man. I kind of wish I would just have a proper, normal model viewer. Like the way her eyes are, it's just a typical thing. Like,
007, report to the mission.
Normally, like human beings, they don't just like lock in their eyeballs directly forward and rotate their cranium to look around. Like, instinctively, you'd typically kind of look in the direct. Like if you're about to turn your head, you would look in that direction first, and then kind of turn your head, and you tend to, like, when people move their eyes, they tend to sort of snap into play. You don't like scan slowly, rotating your eyeballs. Like, you tend to kind of snap to the position where you're looking. So whenever you have a 3D model of a character who either has like weird slow movement of their eyeballs, or like this, where the eyes are literally just always kind of poking forward, well, not poking, but just like pointing straight forward, which obviously is like, for the most part, you're never going to stare at a character's eyeball, so it's not really going to be noticeable. It's effort that is absolutely not justified to put into it for the most part. But having a character who's like just fidgeting and moving around like this, because her eyes are just like so locked into place, it immediately adds like 5,000% to the like uncanny valley effect. And it's like, definitely, like, it's interesting when you like a person who's like, you can have a character who's like, you know, someone like this who's like very, I mean, a little bit of a deer in headlights. These guys all have like very neutral expression. But if you have someone who's like has a stern or focused look, or maybe even Daniel Craig's stoicism, whatever, like that can kind of work. But in that kind of neutral expression, looking around like this, like, even if the model itself is like really well made, and even if the likeness is perfect, which I'm not saying it is, but even if like that, like having someone supposed to kind of look natural just standing around, that like dead stare, locked eyeball angle is like immediately undoing a lot of that other work. Because I think the model looks pretty good. Like, yeah, the rigging on the arms is a little bit iffy, and those fingers look a little questionable. Like, her middle finger is,
007, report to the armory.
there's some stuff going on there for sure, but I would assume that's mainly like, it's just she's got small hands, but she's bound to like a standard sized rig, I'm assuming. Yeah, and like the shoulders are a bit, I mean, for 2008 it's not like terrible or anything, but it's not like, I don't know. It's just interesting. Like, this is exactly why I'm always like, I love being able to look at art assets like this, because you get to kind of appreciate the artistry and the craft in a way you don't really get to while playing. But yeah, like, and as far as the face, like, that's the thing too. Like, someone's likeness isn't just down to the geometry of the face, how they move, and, you know, how they emote. Like, the fact that her face doesn't animate at all and her eyes don't move, like, it stands out so much more because she's moving around, as opposed to these, like, sure, this guy doesn't look like particularly enthusiastic, but he doesn't look, the ways in which she looks weird, like, doesn't really apply to the other characters. Anyway, that was interesting.
007, report to the mission briefing room.
Okay, sure. Is this the mission briefing room? I'm here. Are you happy now? It's like, yeah, sure. Can I look at the glare? Yeah, this is the rooftop chase, which was surprisingly kind of cool. This is interesting because it's like, this location actually looks so different from the movie. And this actually, I'm curious, it says this level is based on the Brigance Opera House located on Lake Constance in Brigance, Austria, which makes it sound like it's a real place that, like, I guess is where they filmed it. But if this opera house is on a lake, that did not come across at all in the film. Like, it's the one location that feels totally different in the game compared to what it looked like in the movie.
007, report to the mission briefing room.
But yeah, these types of concept paintings of locations and stuff, I just tend to not find that interesting. But that's just my preference. Like, I'm far more interested in character design as opposed to like environment art and what have you. Okay, so I guess we get these two rooms for each of these. debriefings. Full opera scene in the movie had like 0 setups. Yeah, but that's because like nothing in the movie has any setup. It's like, I forget what happens in what order or whatever, because yeah, the whole thing of him going to see Mathis and going to wherever they go, that party, whatever, like that whole thing is not in the game at all. But it's like a big plot point in the film is that Bond is like investigating Green because he's like the big villain.
007, report to the armory.
But Green is like making deals with the CIA to like, you know, they're like somewhat complicit or at least looking to get benefits out of Green's sort of taking over, or like, you know, it's sort of coup, I guess, of like installing the general as the new head of state. Like it's sort of toppling the government a bit off screen or what have you. And CIA like doesn't want Bond to get in the way of, like, they don't want him to eliminate Green so that like they don't get their sweet government topple deals. And because of that, they're like putting pressure on MI6 to basically cancel Bond. And it's all like a kind of needless and dumb contrivance to eventually get to the point where Bond has to like go rogue because he's no longer backed by his government, but M secretly believed in him the whole time, etc. And the funny thing is, like, the way that materializes in the film is that like he's out and about traveling, and like he traces Green to the or like he tracks him to the airport and checks where he's going, and he's like, oh, he's not getting on a private jet to Bolivia or whatever. And Bond's like, all right, get me on the next flight there. And then the kind airline lady is like, sorry, your card's canceled. MI6 has put you on lockdown. Do you have another card so you can book your flight? And Bond's like, nah, I'm good. Walks out the room. And then like in the next scene, he's like, well, I flew to Austria or wherever he's going. It's like, wait, what? Like, in one scene, it's established that his assets have been frozen. He has no ability to go anywhere. And in the next scene, he has traveled internationally.
Report to the mission briefing room.
Like, it's very strange. But that's just the kind of movie that Quantum of Solace is. For the most part, the movie doesn't really have like big weird like inconsistencies that are unexplained in that sense. It just has stuff that isn't explained, period. It's just like things happen or whatever. Is this the one we looked at? Yeah. Some of these are more or less interesting than others. Some of them have actual characters that we might recognize. But when it's like random thug man, I mean, we should have all of those too, I guess, but yeah, this is like the opening sniper part. Well, not these two screenshots, but like this. Yeah, this is the interior. This was the first level we played in like the second stream that actually, like, where the game got good. Bar again. Rip late. So I guess the attachments are referring to like the different attachments in multiplayer. This is the bomb guy or whatever. It's so weird that they give you the information on the weapons, but not for the characters. Is this the guy? I guess this is the guy. It's also funny that like the airport part that leads to this like elaborate chase action scene
007, report to the mission briefing.
where they're like on top of this fuel truck leading to this big like, yeah, this part where the fuel truck is like crashing into the plane or whatever. Yeah, they have like all these storyboards for this elaborate chase scene that is like one of the action highlights in Casino Royale, the film. In this game, this scene that we're seeing storyboards for here does not happen on screen. It is being narrated by whoever is talking at us in the mission briefings in between levels. Like, we complete the level, and then like we just hear radio chatter describing this or whatever, which happens multiple times in this game, and it's quite bizarre. I mean, obviously, it's like a budget thing. They couldn't figure out a way to have the scene happen on screen in a way that they could produce with the resources they had. It's not like a purely creative choice, I understand that, but it's still baffling. You would think that like one of the most exciting action set pieces in the film would be like prioritized as something to put in the game, but no. I just saw something very funny in that thumbnail. Wait, I pressed A a little too quickly. Now I get the option to skip. Okay, let me resume. There we go, now we can skip. I tried to skip the black screen before it was finished, but luckily I could resume and see the rest of the black screen fade in. Can I sprint? Oh, I can. I can sprint through these rooms. Oh yeah, this is the train level. Inspired by a scene that was filmed but not included in Casino Royale. That's kind of cool. I don't remember who Bliss is, but whatever. Same. Yeah, the casino where you walk around in this big stealth level turned shootout. I will say that for the most part, the stealth stuff isn't too overbearing. Storyboards for an unproduced cutscene. I guess I could have looked at some of this description at the airport stuff. A lot of the time, these descriptions are so nondescript. I kind of forget that it might actually have interesting information here. Oh, this is the train level. Okay. Private train car on the way to Montenegro. While Bliss and his men are served drinks, Bond bursts in through the skylight. Shotgun, that was a fun weapon to use. Yeah, so this whole part, you know, where they go to Casino Royale and they play at the casino, like the main like biggest story beat in the entire film. Yeah, that's not in the game. I don't want to look. I want to. Okay, so in this room you can't get information about the storyboards. Only in the other room. I see. I've got Mads Mikkelsen, so his likeness is like okay, pretty good, not immaculate, but all right. And yeah, in his case, his vacant stare, you know, that just feels in character. His suit looks a bit shit though, doesn't it? You fucking just got it out of the tumble dryer. Like, holy hell. I mean, I'm not one to complain about people's state of dress, but would they even let him into the fucking casino looking like this? Not so sure.
007, report to the armory.
Alright, we got French Jason Statham. Okay, I guess that's like an enemy or something. Remember? But yeah, yeah, this is very funny. Chandelier. Casino chandelier. Did you make use of this? Shooting the large chandelier in the ballroom will cause it to fall. Time your shot to give your enemies an unlucky ending. I did shoot this and drop it, and that was fun, but I was too scared to see if I actually hit anyone with it. Oh yeah, the fully automatic clock. That was a fun weapon to use. Oh yeah, this is the stairway assassin QTE fight guy. Like from the movie. But yeah, see this where he's like at the table playing cards. Yeah, that's not in the game. Like you sneak around the casino fucking shooting everyone. And then there's like a radio briefing scene. And then when the game resumes, you're like sitting at the poker table having just been drugged and having to leave. But like the actual card game, not only is there like not gameplay where you get to play poker, there isn't even a cutscene of him. Like there are no cutscenes of Bond interacting with Le Chiffre or sitting down to play or even really discussing the card game or interacting with Felix Leiter, which is also kind of a major plot point and a like because he's there and playing and everything too. Like there's so many grossly cut corners in like having all the pieces there for you to even comprehend the sequence of events that is being depicted. It's very strange. So this is the part after the casino where you get kidnapped and tortured and have to rescue her. And then there's the final Casino Royale level in Venice. Yeah, storyboards were unproduced cutscenes showing actual story events. Yeah, seeing them having like an actual relationship, them interacting with each other, it would have been quite helpful to like get across the idea that Bond actually cares about this person, because the only reason we're seeing these scenes in the game at all is because he is like reminiscing about his lost love as he's heading into the final shootout of Bottom of Solace. But instead of actually reminiscing about Vesper, he recounts the entirety of Casino Royale except skipping over the parts where he actually interacts with her. So like that's a little bit weird. Oh yeah, the nail gun. Try shooting Gettler in the eye patch to receive her. I guess that's what I did. I didn't realize that's what I did, but I apparently one-shotted him. Yeah. So I don't even know what to make of this. Like Vesper and Camille, they like stand around looking annoyed that they just have to be placed on this little spinning pedestal inside MI6 office. But everyone else, it's just a mannequin. What about M? Is M also annoyed? Oh yeah, she is. I mean, that's in character, but still. Why are the women standing here being annoyed and the men are just mannequins? That is so strange. Like, I'm a little weirded out by that and confused. Oh, the super magnum. Are you able to find this? I didn't realize it was hidden, but I did find it.
007, report to the mission briefing room.
I'm here. I'm standing right in front of you. Her accent's actually quite impressive. Like the fact that she looks like quite natural compared to some of the other characters. The same animation for all the women? I'm not sure. I don't think so. Well, maybe. I think they like because. Oh, I guess probably. Okay, yeah, I was gonna say because Camille wasn't like standing with her arm crossed the entire time, but I guess she was for the most part, right? Because she had like the hot dog fingers and stuff, right? So presumably, yeah. I mean, they wouldn't have like that's probably the thing, right? There's like just one animation that they put on the female characters, and then like the one animation or just like the pose rather for the men. Like I think he's entirely static, but I'm not even sure. I don't know. I guess so. But like, why couldn't they just put the women in a neutral pose? It's like, it's so funny that they put them in this like very annoyed looking animation. What a strange choice.
007, report to the armory.
If I can find it, sure. Stop yelling at me, will you? Quantum Part 2.
Report to the armory.
Sure. There's like 4 pictures, okay. No unproduced cutscene storyboards here. Yeah, even the table is a little sparse. You just see the camera feed into the next room. Like, I mean, I could just walk there. Fine. Here's the camera unlocks. These portraits are a little funny looking. Like, I can kind of tell that this is meant to be Eva Green, but it doesn't really look like her. Or, I mean, it's like, it doesn't feel like a great likeness. Guy just looks like fucking Ben Affleck. I'm seeing better days too. This guy? What's his name? Haynes? I only know that name because I saw the name in the
007, report to the mission.
cutscene lists or whatever. He's like the other secret little guy. This guy's likeness is actually pretty spot on. But again, like, he's got a pretty just like expressive face. So even when he's like in this, you see, he's got this kind of snarl, right? So he's already got this kind of emotive expression, which I think helps like give the feeling that the likeness is more on point. Like, most of these characters have these like mug shots. Literal mugshot in this case, I guess. Then Le Chiffre gets this weird Dutch angle train photograph. And everyone's got this like like terrified staring in the camera look, but of course she gets, I don't know, model agency headshot. I mean, it's funny how some of these, like, I feel like the actual in-game models look both like more natural and have a better likeness. Like, I don't think this looks, if I didn't know that this was supposed to be Olga Kurylenko's character, I don't think I would be able to identify that that's who she's supposed to be. There we go, stoic Daniel Craig. It's a little unfortunate that the only model we get to see of him is with the sunglasses. We don't get to appreciate the full extent of his stoicism. His posture, though. Well, that was fun, I guess. We just run down the hallway. That's it. That's the MI6 debriefing rooms. What a strange feature. All right, we've looked at achievements, we've looked at debriefing rooms. Let's see what happens when we press this button here, multiplayer. True Call of Duty fashion, we gotta boot up the multiplayer client. Game experience may change. New maps. I mean, I won't be able to do that now because the 360 store is down. Huh. Yeah, I was curious what this would even like present. I would assume that they would be paid content anyway. Customize equipment. Weapon store. Burnt balance 0. Toggle gold plated. Okay, so we got to purchase the standard, and then you can get the gold-plated version. It's LTK Super Magnum. I guess there's no gold-plated Super Magnum. Okay, there's no gold-plated grenades, I guess. Proximity mine. Gadgets? Okay. These are like perks. They're not exactly gadgets, are they? I mean, I guess the game doesn't have like a gadget button. Multiple armaments? Okay. This is your melee activation radius. Attachment. Oh, so I guess you buy this and you just apply it to whatever weapon. I guess that's how it works. Seems a bit fucked up if you can... Yeah, okay, you have at least some... I was gonna say, if you have like no starting weapons, you just start with a pistol. But I mean, I guess that's kind of like how... that was like the Call of Duty model too, right? Like that's... You start off a little bit barren in terms of the items you get, but you know, you pretty quickly would level up enough to at least fill out like the loadout. Yeah, so I don't have any gadgets. Now here's the... I wonder if I were to start... Because playing online, I'm sure I wouldn't be able to do like a dedicated server or whatever. But I wonder if I could do that here. Yeah, so if I like create a system link server. Barge, chemical plant, a lot of gray facilities, huh? The Italia rooftop. Yeah, I was curious to see if there's something like if it feels like there's assets here. Like, even though I'm sure they would reuse stuff from the main game, if it's like locations or something that doesn't seem like we'd seen it in the main game, it'd be interesting to see. So none of this is in the manual, by the way, because it doesn't just tells you to connect to Xbox Live or whatever. I'm curious to see what's in here. Bond versus the organization. So this is like team deathmatch, I guess. Or no, actually, I guess not. This is... Bond is a one-man army sent in to disarm organization explosives or eliminate the organization. Organization members must protect the explosives with their lives. Wait, everyone plays as Bond. The player with the most points at the end wins. Does that mean that like everyone takes turn? I'm assuming this doesn't mean everyone is Bond. MI6 versus the organization. MI6 must assist Bond to the escape zone. The team swaps sides at the end of each round. It's actually kind of cool. Like it does, you know. I will say that as far as like this game being primarily just Call of Duty, with a kind of very light sprinkling of Bond, like reskinning on top, makes for a pretty uninteresting Bond game, and not the most probably polished or interesting Call of Duty game either. But in terms of like Call of Duty games having a bunch of different online multiplayer modes, this is certainly not the first Bond game with well, not with online multiplayer, but with multiplayer in general. But I do think that most of the previous Bond FPSs and the like that has like all these different modes, like they often don't feel super like well thought out or well designed or whatever. Like, and I would trust this game, I think, to have better thought out multiplayer modes. And the idea of taking a pretty bog standard like FPS game that doesn't have particular Bond flavor in its, you know, levels or gadgets or mechanics or anything, but having rule sets for multiplayer that give it a little bit more of that spy secret agent type flavor is a pretty neat idea. Like the Golden Gun mode, I reckon, is probably not a Call of Duty staple. I mean, there was probably a mode like this in some Call of Duty games, so I guess it wouldn't surprise me at all, but yeah, like territory control. Classic mode with weapon spawn points. Yeah, so that's like just team deathmatch. Even that, I guess, is probably not something you see in Call of Duty games. I mean, again, I haven't played that many of them, and I'm sure there's been modes like this, but it's not the standard deathmatch mode where it's like actually spawning weapons. So I guess classic means weapon spawns, and conflict is standard, like Call of Duty style deathmatch. If I pick Bond versus match options, I wonder if this will actually let me start, or do I have to like, yeah, waiting for other players. I can hover around, but I can't move. I got this little action guy health bar because I'm not playing as Bond, I guess. Case, there's no one. Yeah, so the game won't actually start until there's enough players. I figured that might be the case, but it might not be the case in like free-for-all modes. Yeah, can I leave, please? Thank you. There we go. That's weird. Like, unskippable. Play competitively or just for fun on Xbox Live. Actually, I guess you can do private matches here too. Oh boy. Wait, Mayhem. What's that? Oh, I guess this is like a playlist. That's what they call that, right? Where you skip between different game modes. That's like how stuff works in an online multiplayer these days. And by these days, I mean in 2008 onwards. So what do you guys reckon is the best... Where do we have the best chances of finding matches? I'm gonna go conflict. Vote to skip. What? Am I in a lobby? I guess I am in a lobby. One vote to skip this map. Do I have any online friends who wants to join me for a game of Quantum of Solace on the Xbox 360? Ah, they're playing an actual new game. I don't think I've updated my friends list in like 15 years. Leaderboards? Wait, what's... Is this like... What kind of leaderboard is this gonna be, actually? Just for, like, of all time? Well, this is actually interesting. Like, I'm glad we did take this look, because it's pretty intriguing. Like, it gives me the impression that this was probably quite decent, but I have to imagine that there was probably no point in time where this was, like, you know, all that lively. But this was in that era when, like, everything just had to have an online multiplayer mode, whether it made sense or not. And for this game in particular, it made more sense than many games. You know, Bond games had an association with like the first-person shooter multiplayer type stuff. So, and you know, this was kind of the first one of these in a while. Especially, you know, on 360 and Xbox Live and everything. I don't think Nightfire was playable on Xbox Live. The PC version had online multiplayer, but I don't know that the Xbox version did. And that multiplayer mode, we did play a bit of that, just with like bot matches and stuff. Like, it's not very good. It's really kind of weird. Has a lot of weird rules for like... you're not allowed to, like, there's multiple Bond skins, but if someone picks like spacesuit Bond, then no one is allowed to pick any other Bond, and or like players who pick good guys aren't allowed to be on opposite teams, so they're fighting each other. Like, it's a lot of weird shit like that. So this probably was like the first actual honest to god online multiplayer like console Bond game, and judging from the single player game, like I'm sure it would have played fine actually. But I mean, yeah, maybe if you go to an actual Call of Duty game, you can boot up a game 17 years later and actually find a game. But yeah, I think it goes without saying that games like that are definitely exceptions and not what you might expect. But when we were playing Nightfire, when we played the PC version, in order to even like get it up and running, it required this like elaborate fan patch thing that which I'm very grateful exists. Like, it just makes it playable on modern PCs and does a lot of fixes for screen resolution and refresh rate and all that kind of stuff. But that game, I guess, originally also used GameSpy for its online. So there's this basically complete overhaul of the online infrastructure so you can actually play the PC version of Nightfire online. So when we were playing that, I had this thought in the back of my head that it might be fun to like organize community online multiplayer, and I haven't like made a serious effort to try to do that, but for some of these games, like if there's an actual opportunity to try and set something like that up, I think it would be very interesting, if only to get to experience what those modes are like here, getting to see how do these game modes play and everything. And I would assume that like the PC version of this would probably be the simplest, most accessible way of doing that. Like obviously you can't buy that game anymore, but you can't really buy this either. So for people to join in, like I would assume that something like that would be the easiest way, assuming that that's just like if you have a pirated copy of the PC version, I would assume that you could set up like a private game and just play together. I don't know how that would work, but again, like it takes a fair bit of effort to actually set something like that up and organize it, and that's more effort than I've felt willing to go to, and I wouldn't ever want to have that be something that I feel obligated to do as part of playing through the game for the project in general. But as kind of a special event thing or something, I think it, like, if it could be organized, I think it would be fun. I guess I'm obviously talking about this game right now because it's the game we're looking at, and I think it's, of all the games we've played so far, I would say this has a decent chance of actually being the game with the best multiplayer. But I think realistically, the most straightforward, simplest thing / the thing that's the most interesting for the most number of people / whatever, I'm guessing would probably trying to do GoldenEye on Switch, because it's like available and relatively accessible, I guess. I don't know. PC Nightfire, I guess you could just, you know, get pointed in the right direction to what to download and get it up and running, but I don't know that game's all that great. Granted, I don't think GoldenEye is like all that great in multiplayer either, but in any case, if something like that is ever to be organized, it won't be right now, and it'd be something I'd have to look into a little bit and whatever. Like, if there's work to be done, if someone else was more willing than me to do it, that'd be fine. But I suppose what I can just say is, if people are interested in something like that, and I would say I don't mind trying to connect with people anywhere just to see if it runs or whatever, but I am in Sweden, so I would assume that, like, the closer you are geographically, the better the odds are of it actually like functions and like being worth even trying. But if someone is interested in that kind of stuff, like, feel free to you know, to mention it on the Discord and see if that's something we might want to organize at some point. So I don't know, like, it's something that I would like, if at all possible, I would like to do that at some point. But it's pretty far outside of my wheelhouse in a lot of ways. Like, just in terms of organizing online multiplayer stuff, it's just not something that I ever regularly do. That it's a little bit of an extra hurdle for me to organize. but the idea of it seems intriguing, and I would like to do it for like thoroughness, if nothing else. Like ideally, in terms of like looking at all these games, actually looking at the multiplayer component of them, I think would be very valuable. And I have always felt that like skipping over that aspect is like unfortunate, but it is still like reflective of how I would be playing this game. Like if I had bought this game and played it in 2008, I probably would have hopped online to try it to see what it was like, but I probably wouldn't, like I would probably primarily have cared about the single player stuff. I mean, that's basically what my brief experiences with Call of Duty was like, so that's kind of what I would expect. So it's not without merit, even if we do skip all that, but it would be interesting. Would be interesting. So with that, I think we can say that we are officially done with the Xbox 360 version of Quantum of Solace in terms of playing the game. However, we have a little bit of spreadsheeting and tier listing to do, so I'm gonna swap over my display here. And I guess actually what we'll do is pop out the disc before I forget. Not bury that in my 360. Off. I can get some jams. And a moment here, I'm gonna dig up a few things here. Yeah, okay. So we have the tier list stuff. I know that you don't have it on screen just yet. You will in a moment. But before that, we are going back to the spreadsheet because we did not have time to look at the bond quotient for Quantum of Solace. What's up, Doom Noob? So if you're new here, this is where we calculate the bond quotient, the scientific method that I have devised to determine which James Bond game is the most James Bond of all James Bond video games. The method by which we are doing so is by looking at many recurring elements of James Bond cinema and seeing how many of them and which of them show up in this game. So we have a list of categories here, a list of elements, and if this element is present in the game, it'll get a 1. If it's absent, it'll get a 0, and in some cases, it might be present in spirit or not letter, or vice versa, and it might get a 0.5 or even a 0.25. And you'll see that there's some blank spots here. Those are things where I'm a little bit unsure, and it's like, well, I'm gonna have to double check the tapes later on to confirm. But none of these numbers are final anyway. It's more of a note-taking process that we will get back to at the end of this whole project. Because as you can see, we have all these numbers, and they will add up to what I call the raw bond quotient. And this is a number that is simply a tally of all these, sum of these numbers. However, this is not the final score, because what we need to do is we need to weigh each of these criteria based on how prevalent they are in the films. Meaning, if an element here that I have identified as like a recurring thing from the films is something that is in every single film, then you should reward a game for including it, or dock points for not including it. But some of these things may be stuff that's only in half the films, in which case we shouldn't be as harsh on the game for not including it, etc. So I don't have a public spreadsheet of it, but I am tracking these things for the films as we're watching them. And before all is said and done, we're going to do a full movie marathon to make sure that I have the complete data set for all 25 movies. Side note, I didn't decide on this, but one thought I had is maybe the values should be weighed differently based on when the game came out, meaning if statistics are skewed a certain way at certain points in time, you know, maybe we shouldn't, like, maybe we should judge a 1989 game based on what, like, how these values would be weighed in all Bond films up through 89 as opposed to 2021 or whenever No Time to Die came out. Once I have all that data collected, it's going to be easy enough to do that. So we'll see if maybe I go ahead and do that. I think that will add another interesting kind of statistical quirk to all of it. But the point being, this number right here, the raw bond quotient, can give an indication. Clearly, if a game has 4.5, it doesn't have a ton of bond elements in it, versus a game that has 25.5. But a lot of these games that might have similar score here, but are getting points for different things, the gap could widen between them, and some of these things might change fairly drastically. I don't even know. So that's going to be... I'm really excited and looking forward to doing that. Like, as far as finishing this project, I think for me the most satisfying thing will be to like have this full data set and actually put together this list. And ultimately, of course, the main goal at the end of the day is to be able to put forth a solid ranking of all 50 games. I did, of course, rank all Batman games, but that was to me a less scientific affair. And to be clear, I can rank all games on their bond quotient very straight up and down. I can do that completely data driven, but that's not going to determine what's the best Bond game. That's just going to determine what's the most Bond game, and that's valuable in its own right. But basically what I'm going to want to do is kind of combine this with my tier list rankings and come up with some kind of formula, I guess, for how to translate that such that I can order all 50 games in a ranked list for which are the best and least best Bond games. And that's going to be a lot of fun. And I think that's going to be like an 8-hour stream in and of itself, most likely. So with that introduction out of the way, let's fill in some numbers here. Quantum of Solace does feature a tuxedo. That is something he wears, at least briefly, in the casino level. I'm pretty sure we get to see it at some point before he stumbles out into his car or whatever. He definitely does in the film. I'm trying to think for a second, like, is there something that is so like it's just off screen, or we don't see the character model? Like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that there is a tuxedo clad Daniel Craig in this game. I'm gonna say I think we can put a 1 there. There's definitely gunplay. Oh, I'm accidentally resetting the timer here. I can do... the timer's not relevant anyway, but I can... How do I... Yeah, turn on the hotkeys. There we go. There are fisticuffs. You have the melee takedowns. Gadgets? I'm gonna say... No, there aren't really any gadgets, right? Is there anything that we could describe as a gadget? I don't think so. He doesn't even use... Well, I was gonna say he doesn't even use his cell phone for anything. He, like, taps into camera feeds, and you, like, hack terminals or whatever, but you're not using a device to do that. It's just a little circular progress bar that shows up. I think... Like, obviously in the film there aren't really like Bond gadgets really, and that's the thing. Like they're kind of faithful in that respect. like when I think of gadgets, like we're really grasping for straws here, right? Like if you look at the pause menu in GoldenEye and you have this like computer interface in his watch, like if you look at that watch and the menus and the like how that's presented, yeah, that's definitely like a Bond gadget thing. But in the context of that game, you actually have other gadgets. You're doing stuff with them. So the menu stuff, like, it gets, you don't even consider it. You don't even think about it. But here, it's like, do we want to attach some value to that aspect being there? It's like the way that they could think of to give that slight Bond flavor. I feel like it's worth more than 0. Looking at the list here of other games that have gotten a 0 on this, like, it's definitely games where there is 0, like, anything to do with gadgets. I'm gonna say it's definitely not more than a 0.5, but I feel like 0.5 is almost a little too generous. I think a quarter point is fair, honestly. There's like some kind of token effort to have something, but it's not relevant to gameplay, and it's like, I mean, I think this is evidenced by the fact that multiplayer has the concept of gadgets, but the gadgets are literally just extra HP, extra armor, double ammo, increased range. Like, they aren't actual gadgets. They're just, you know, what's the word? Like modifiers. So I'm going to stand by my 0.25. Power-ups? Kind of, right? Driving car. So, okay, this one is, I'm torn because there's no driving gameplay, but there is a car chase cutscene, and the game doesn't like implement driving, but I know that we have given points for other things. I can consult the spreadsheet here and take a look, because this is not necessarily about gameplay mechanics, but more about what aspects of Bond's like skill set and character are being depicted in the game. And we definitely get to see him being a skilled driver, because this exciting car chase is like part of the opening cutscene. Like, I gave points for driving a boat in the Game Boy game, even though that happens like in a cutscene. Tomorrow Never Dies has like the boat chase scene, which I don't think there was actual gameplay there, and I think I've given points for that. So I think just in terms of consistency, we have to give a point for that. Because they did at least go to the effort of animating the CG cutscene of the car chase. Which is, you know, especially in the context of all the other corners cut in this game, that's you know, that's something. Actually, okay, you do get to drive that construction vehicle for about 3 seconds. Because for a moment I was like, yeah, you get to drive that. You don't have control over it, but you're in first-person view as that, like, the bulldozer or whatever is like moving forward. But does that qualify as driving other? Typically, that's for like a jet ski or a helicopter or a plane, or, you know, a hovercraft or a tank. But I suppose, like, he's not really showing, you know, exceptional driving prowess, but we get to see Bond's like what's the word, not ingenuity, but sort of adaptability. The situation calls for him hopping into this construction vehicle and driving it and like raising the plow to protect himself from gunfire or whatever. I'm surprised so far at how many like points we're scoring here for how like nothing the game is, but I think we gotta give him some credit for that. There are, however, definitely no car gadgets in this film or game. This next one, I bring this up every single time that I'm not quite happy with the name of it, and I remember there was some phrase that came up in that Ultimate Dossier CD-ROM multimedia thing that made me laugh, and I thought, like, man, actually, I got to replace the name of this category with that, and I never remember what it was. But basically, this comes down to Bond's, like, sardonic tone, or, like, just, you know, whether it's through Bond's dialogue or just a kind of humorous nature of the game, like, having that sort of charismatic aspect to the writing or to the characters, like, in theory it can be applied even if it's through other means than Bond's own dialogue. I wouldn't say that this was something that it felt at the forefront in the game, but Bond doesn't have much dialogue in the game, and even though Daniel Craig is perfectly capable of this and gets to do more of this in subsequent films, Quantum of Solace especially, I think, is his by far most, like, charmless film. And Casino Royale is, like, you know, doesn't have the most of that either, and we're seeing even less of it here. But there is, like, you know, there's some exchanges here and there in the briefing stuff that, like, maybe there's, I feel like I would kind of almost have to review more of the dialogue to say for sure whether it's, like, a half point or, like, I don't know. But if you think of James Bond and you think of not Daniel Craig specifically, but just, like, the suave, charming, occasionally jokey, like, serious when it calls for it, but otherwise quite jovial super spy, like, I don't feel like that character is really very present in this game. I think I'm going to leave this blank for now, because I feel like I'd need to kind of listen a little bit more to some, because I mean, I fucking talked over most of the dialogue in this game because it's so impossible to give a shit. So I feel like if I just put a 0 here, I'm not necessarily being completely fair to the game. There might be something more there of merit, so I'm leaving it blank for now, which basically means I'll revisit this and come back to it. Now, drinking is actually something that this game does feature, not prominently, but you know, there's the poisoned drink level, which starts with you either drinking or having just drank poisoned martini or whatever. So it's like a central plot point that Bond is drinking, which, you know, in some games we get a celebratory bottle of champagne in the background in the ending or whatever, but here it's like him actually drinking is part of it. So, like, yeah, that's a full point for sure. Stunts, I mean, there's some daring rooftop jumps. They're like recreations of actual stunts from the film. There's, like, tumbling down the stairs and shit. There aren't necessarily a lot of key moments that are, like, unique or like staged kind of gameplay setups as such. But I think in terms of how the action is designed in the film, like, having some of those moments recreated, like, okay, in the film he drives a dirt bike and, like, jumps onto boats or whatever, which is sick, and that's not at all in the game. That's unfortunate. There's not, like, you know, the bungee jump on the dam in GoldenEye or something quite on that level, but the fact that the jumping between rooftops in the kind of Sienna rooftop chase, and I mean, fuck, there's the construction site parkour scene where you jump off the crane onto the container and stuff like that. That definitely counts. That definitely counts. So gambling, this one I'm a little bit torn on, because gambling is obviously a very central component to Casino Royale, and the game here, despite featuring the entirety of Casino Royale's plot, almost goes out of its way to not have you gambling. But the level where you get poisoned and have to stumble out of the casino does start you at the poker table. There is a moment of Bond sitting at a poker table, and I feel like I can give a full point for drinking, because him drinking the poison is, like, the setup for that entire level. Whereas the gambling part is kind of like what happened prior to that. I think we can give a half point for this because the gambling and the casino is like, they definitely should have done more with it, but as far as like casinos and gambling like being part of the wider tapestry of James Bond sort of imagery, it is there. There's like 1 or 2 levels at the casino, even though you're not like seeing much gambling. But I think I can't give them 0 points for it, but this is like there should have been at least 1 level that's fully just playing poker. Like this is the game where you shoehorn that in for sure. There have been other Bond games where you have to complete a bit of gambling to progress, but this is not one of them. Like, that's a bit fucked up. Globetrotting is absolutely a thing in this game. Even if everything looks a bit gray and beige, you're in that desert, you know, in the end. You're in the Monte Carlo casino. You're in the you're in Venice. You're in the Siena rooftop chase. Yeah, there's like quite a bit of scenic imagery. Oh, the train level. I don't remember even where that takes place, but yeah, I guess there's even the iconic opera house or whatever. So yeah, full marks for globetrotting for sure. Yeah, block credit card. Yeah, Bond's globetrotting powers are rivaled only by his dick powers, and they too just take him from continent to continent, whether he has means of paying for it or not. M briefings, they're a bit weird, but it's mostly not M. It's mostly some guy yelling at you. But I think we can still give full points because the game leans very hard into the imagery and the graphical presentation of this like MI6 mission briefing stuff, which I think is visually awesome. It's actually really cool. It's unfortunately just presented in a pretty chaotic, fast-paced way that makes the information very difficult to take in. And to be clear, M briefing doesn't strictly have to feature the character M. In a lot of cases, it's like, you know, some equivalent works just as well. Like, it's more about the concept of Bond being given his mission by his like commanding officer or whatever. And that's certainly an element that's debatably more present in the game than in the film. So I don't think it's fair to say that they skimped on that aspect. Like, they might have executed somewhat poorly on it, but they actually they didn't skimp on it per se, conceptually. Q briefing, however, there aren't really anything like Q. The character isn't introduced until Skyfall in the Craig movies, but whatever stuff Q would have been giving him, like, there's nothing like that in the film or the game, so there's no Q briefing. And even though you have other people yelling at you during those briefing mission interludes or whatever, none of it's really of that kind of nature that you would treat as equivalent to a Q briefing. However, I think we have to consider the MI6 debriefing rooms as a kind of de facto Q branch. I don't think we can give full marks for this, but I think a half point for Q branch is not really unfair, because they actually, I think, went above and beyond in like inventing these like Q branch style offices for you to look at concept art and 3D models. Like, they really didn't have to do that, but it felt I don't feel like they did that because of like usability or because it makes sense. They did that because they wanted to have a Q branch in their James Bond game, and I think that's worth something. It's not actually really Q branch, but I think in spirit it is absolutely representative of Q branch, and I think that's worth half a point. Moneypenny had not yet been introduced, so she's not in the game either. Bond, James Bond, the line, I think he says like in the first cutscene. I recall it definitely being in there, so I'm gonna say points for that. The James Bond theme music does appear here and there. like almost conspicuously, I recall it playing in like the first stage where it's like, man, okay, they really want you to feel like it's Bond, whatever means they have, because the game itself doesn't feel very Bond-like. The Bond theme does appear, but also the game has an opening credits sequence with an opening theme song that is not the same as the film, but has a pretty good James Bond theme song vibe to it. And I'm stunned. We're like 2/3 through this list, and there are not that many categories where we've been giving this game a 0. I'm very curious to see how this is going to actually where this is going to land. So gun barrel, of course, the Craig movies are kind of weird with this. They don't typically have proper gun barrel sequences. And I think this game kind of does a weird half gun barrel sequence in the opening. There's like some element to it. It has the gun barrel, like when you're dying in game, that's like you're about to die damage indicator. Like the gun barrel shows up, like it comes in. So like they're at least referencing that, which I think is neat. So like I would say that's not, I don't think that's worth a half point, but I might possibly give like a quarter point for that. But I don't recall, like, it might add up to a half point if there is like half a gun barrel in the intro as well. I'm gonna leave this blank. I'll have to rewatch the intro because I can't quite recall. I think there was something, but I don't remember the exact shape it took. Yeah, like the Bond theme music is not used very prominently in the films. I mean, that's the thing, like traditionally Bond films open with the gun barrel sequence with the James Bond theme song playing leading into the opening scene. And the Daniel Craig Bond films like don't do that, basically. But in the game it sort of comes in at other places too. I'm gonna leave gun barrel blank because I need to double check. I don't want to put down like a preliminary 0.5 and then like not remember that I have to recheck it. So I'd rather leave it blank, but I think it's more than 0. Now I'm starting to think maybe I should use another system of putting a preliminary number, but then like tag it with a color. Just to make sure that the score isn't too uneven and I don't even... You know what? Let's do that. I'm going to put a yellow and I'll put Actually, I'll put 0.25 because that's what I can put confidently. But if there's another gun barrel sequence, like it could even go up to 1 if there is a proper full gun barrel sequence that I just didn't really remember. But I'll use the color to indicate that this needs to be verified. And I'll go back and fill that in for the other stuff too. But I'll do that off stream. But there is, however, a proper opening credits sequence that is not from the film. It's like inspired by it, and it's like these camera flybys of silhouetted James Bonds doing the CQC takedown animations on thugs in these like desert sand dunes. So that's pretty cool. Like with the proper song, like they made a real effort to put a proper James Bond opening credits sequence in this game, which is like shockingly rare. You know, 8-bit games not doing it, maybe not super shocking, but like, or the cell phone games for that matter. But it's not as like, you know, you would think that that's a thing that they would easily like lean into, but it's like it hasn't been as prevalent, or it that's certainly not done as well as you would want or you would think. So this game doing a proper job of it, that's definitely appreciated. Product placements, there sure are plenty of Sony product in this film. There's Sony Vaio laptops, there's Sony Ericsson telephones. There's officially licensed Walther firearms, which technically I guess is product placement. They're not really as in your face about it as they are with the Sony things, but it's definitely, I mean, there's product placements, that's for sure. Bond in peril definitely happens. You get caught and tortured, and then you have to like break free or whatever. there's that level that I guess precedes that scene where he's like handcuffed and he breaks out, and you have to start the level in stealth with no weapons, so you have to take out guys to get your first gun in the stage, etc. So that happens for sure. Bond likeness, this is like more of a statistical thing. This will have no bearing on the Bond quotient, like as far as how it compares with the films, obviously, but like there is it's interesting to just see which games do use a likeness some way or another, and which don't. And this one, of course, has Daniel Craig's face and his voice. Sexy ladies, sure. There's not many characters who like feature very prominently in general in this game, but Vesper and Camille are both, you know, they're very much in the game. So sexy ladies, comma evil. I wonder how we like. Vesper kind of betrays Bond, but in the end, like she kind of doesn't. She doesn't want to do it. Like, you know, she's sort of forced into a situation. She's not an evil, and it's certainly not by like, you know, she's not a Xenia Onatopp character, right? She's not like the villain's sexy henchman. I think there's an argument to be made that it's like, oh, one of these sexy ladies turns out to be a antagonist of sorts, which I think is like what this could represent. But I think there's like a little bit of a double twist where it turns out that she kind of betrays him, but not really, or at least very reluctantly. So I agree. Like, I don't think it qualifies. It's just like worth pondering for a second. But I'm gonna say that's a 0. Like, if anything, it's like the movie and her character is arguably a little bit of a twist on that idea, and the game like just represents that. But it's not like leaning into that sort of stereotype. James Bond's dick powers. I mean, they're on full force in the film with that other character Fields, who like shows up to supervise him, and he like not even really like flirts with her. It's just like, well, I guess we're having sex now, and let me just be very flippant and casual about this, and whoops, I guess she died off screen. Whatever, her character was in the film for about 5 seconds, it didn't matter. But that entire character and subplot, or whatever you want to call that, isn't even in the game at all, so that's not depicted. And like, as far as Bond's relationship with either Camille or Vesper, regardless of their nature of either of those relationships, they're not really even shown in the game. And if anything, you know, Vesper and Bond, like, they have chemistry, and like their relationship in the film is believable. Like, that's one of the actual interesting parts of the film, is that like they get to know each other, and they have like, you know, they play well off of each other, that when they kind of fall for each other, it's like believable, and it's not, you know, it doesn't feel forced at all. And you kind of, you know, believe in their romantic connection. So that's like not really the whole dick powers thing. It's not him just showing up and like her throwing herself at him. And on the other side of the equation, like, I hadn't really reflected on it, but I think maybe part of why I like, despite everything, part of the reason why I like Camille as a character is that like she doesn't really have that kind of relationship with Bond. Like, they have a pretty platonic relationship. Honestly, I don't remember if they get like romantically involved at all, because it's impossible to remember shit about Quantum of Solace. But she's not defined by that at all. Like, she has her own agency, and she has her own motivations. And if anything, like, we're introduced Like they even like discuss in the movie how she is, you know, using her equivalent powers to get to her goals, and Bond is like quite complimentary about it. He's like, oh, I'm not judging, like, oh, that's, you know, good on you, that's pretty sick, like, couldn't have done it better myself. Like, that's pretty funny. So like, I think that she is like so much more his equal, as opposed to someone who just is kind of subservient to his, you know, expression of dick powers. So I feel like this element is actually quite absent in the game. Her name's Strawberry Fields. Don't think they had the courage to say the full. I mean, they didn't have the wherewithal to like say anything out loud in that film. It's just like they forgot, or someone, they couldn't hire a writer to write the line for them to say it, so it didn't happen. But regardless, I'm gonna put a 0 for dick powers in this game. That feels reasonable. Henchman. I mean, I guess you chase the bomb guy, but you don't really have like a boss fight or a showdown with him. Like, I don't even know who would qualify properly as like a henchman, because there's like a few side kind of villains, sort of, but you don't really have proper, like, they're not necessarily henchmen, and you don't necessarily fight them. They're not like the villain's bodyguard type characters. Like, I mean, there's the, you know, the machete assassin guy in the stairwell. That's like a mid-boss character, but he's like trying to kill the villain, right? He's like there to kill Mads Mikkelsen, and Bond like has to interfere because he needs him to not get killed. So he's not a henchman. The closest, I guess, is like the guy with the eye patch, who's there when you know, when Vesper dies, because he's like an operative for Quantum or whatever, the organization. But I feel like that's like, it's like really a stretch. I mean, there's no Odd Job or Jaws, right? There's nothing like that. So I'm like struggling a little bit to think of who would fit this role. Just, I don't know. I guess it would be that the stairwell guy, maybe. He's not a henchman in that sense, but he's like someone for Bond to fight who isn't just a guy. So it's like mid-boss, more so than a henchman. But you don't, like, the whole villain setup is definitely not the most traditional, like, old-fashioned. I mean, the villain is, but not like his, you know, he doesn't have a villainous posse or anything. Yeah, like 0.5 is maybe even a stretch, but because yeah, there's like all these. I mean, there's even the fight you have with is it Mitchell in the Sienna level? But he's not a henchman, really. He's like an agent of the bad guys, but he's not, you know, henchman. Sort of implies that it's like a, you know, an individual with more of a personal connection to the larger antagonist. But I mean, I guess if we think of like Red from Russia with Love, he's not necessarily like the personal, like he's part of Spectre or whatever, or the Russians or whatever the fuck, like, but that's like, he has that vibe to him. But the villains and the plot are so poorly defined that it becomes kind of weird. That like another 0.25 maybe? I don't know. I agree that it doesn't quite feel right to put a 0. But it's not really... It's definitely not a 1. I mean, they did make sure to put that fight in there for you to have someone to fight. And again, this is more of an effect of the films not really having them than like skipping over the henchman part as such. I'm gonna say another 0.25, and I'll mark this as yellow for further research and reconsideration. Iconic villain is like, again, I don't like the phrasing of this per se, but obviously there is a main villain in the film, and he is in the game, and he's like essentially the final boss. So that's like a simple one. I think it's like, it's there, it's correct. But just to clarify, the categorization as iconic isn't like a value judgment of how good or memorable of a villain it is. It's more about like, is there a proper Bond villain? And I think there is. So Villain's Lair is kind of interesting because the final level is like, it's a little bit of a lair because it's like this isolated location where the villain has sort of barricaded themselves. Like, it's not a proper villain lair. But it like kind of almost is. You know? And I'm trying to remember if there's like a... Is there anything like a villain lair in the Casino Royale part of the game? I don't really think so, but I'm willing to put a 0.5 here. Thanks for the follow, by the way. Welcome. I'm gonna put a 0.5. There's a villain's facility at least. Because not all games have like even anything like that at all. We can consult some of the other games. So trying to look here, Nightfire, I think that would be the GBA version. Let me double check. Yeah, the GBA Nightfire got a 0.5 where the others got a 0.1. That's the only 0.5 for a Villain's Lair. Let's see here. Not enough, got a 0. Of course, I can't remember. Well, yeah, you're in like the submarine and stuff, which I guess I didn't count that as a lair. I guess the other thing is like the location, it's like in a hotel. It's like they're kind of barricaded themselves there, but it's not a facility that exists for the purpose of villainry. You know, it's not like, ostensibly anyway, it's an actual hotel. That is sort of, you know, being sublet to the villains for villainous purposes. Yeah, I guess it doesn't really... You know, it's a showdown that happens there, but I agree that we can... I forget exactly... I mean, how it's presented. Again, like, some of this is just extra hazy because the movie is impossible to remember any details from, and as a result, I didn't really pay attention to much dialogue setting up some of the locations and scenes in the game either. I think that's probably a 0, but depending on how they frame the kind of ownership of the location, like, I could see it going slightly above 0 to maybe like a 0.25, but we'll leave it like that. There's not really a proper scene of the villain giving a speech, I don't think. It's not, I mean, there's barely like cutscenes of anyone talking, and there's not this like contrived scene of them. Well, there is actually the Casino Royale scene, right? It happens during a cutscene, but we get to see bits and pieces of Bond being tortured by Mads Mikkelsen, who is kind of speeching at him. So I do think that counts. I just don't think there's like, Green doesn't really give speeches. It's like a little haphazardly presented, but I think we should count it. It's there. It is there, which is more than we see in some games. James Bond will return is a phrase that shows up in the closing credits of the game. And no Bond is a rare category where we have given out minus points for 2 games for not featuring the character James Bond whatsoever. I'm a little stunned looking at this without even having seen the final tally. There's been a lot of 1s and some 0.25s. I think this game will actually rank notably above average, which I would not have expected really just without thinking about it too hard. So let's see what the final score is. The raw Bond quotient. It adds up to 20.75, and that might well get rounded up to a 21. It kind of benefits from being based on 2 movies. I mean, that's true, but I don't think it earns that many additional points for it. I mean, sure, it gets additional globetrotting, but either, we could look at the 4 or 5 levels based on Quantum of Solace, and that would still qualify. It has the opening credits and the sexy ladies and the theme song and the product placement. Like, it has a lot of those things that aren't super in your face just because it doesn't have, an Aston Martin that shoots rockets as you're chasing Jaws. Like, it still actually has many other elements, drinking and gambling and stunts. Like, it just has a lot of things that are kind of low key. And it also, this is a great example of of it scoring highly here, despite like some of these things not being executed in the most exciting or interesting way. Like the M briefings. This game has a lot of M briefing, but it doesn't have very good M briefings, So I think this is probably going to be a game that has like a very high Bond quotient relative to its like tier list rating. And I think there's going to be some games that are the exact opposite. So they provide an interesting contrast of where like Bond quotient and tier lists placing can be very different and represent very different things. Interesting. And it's going to be super interesting to see how the other games, I mean, especially the PS2 game, but even the DS one, how many elements they kind of carry through of all this and end up with a similar number. But before we move on any further, it is time. Let me just take a quick look. It is time to update the tier list. You can find this list when I've updated it after the stream. I'll post a link on Discord. Technically, you can probably find it. You can scroll up to an earlier version, and you can find my page on tiermaker.com or whatever. But anyway, I won't go over all this in detail because we'll sit here for another hour as I just recount the list. But since the question came up specifically earlier on, what are the highest rated 3D Bond games? Everything or Nothing is like unquestionably an S+ tier God game, as is the Game Boy game. Nightfire is the one game, the console Nightfire specifically, which is significantly better than the PC, let alone GBA versions. I had this game back in the day, and I really enjoyed it. And it has some annoyances. I don't like it kind of as much as I did back then in some ways. But it's still, to me, a pretty excellent game. And it has frustrating moments. Like the driving stages just kind of suck. There's like the underwater car driving level that has like really punishing checkpoints that's like a pain. But when it's sick, it's sick. And it has like the space satellite laser beam boss fight that it's like incredibly sick. like just an awesome final level. So it really ends on a super high note. Like it's a great game. From Russia with Love is like, it suffers a lot from direct comparison with Everything or Nothing, which is the game that immediately preceded it from the same developer. And I think Everything or Nothing is superior to From Russia with Love in almost every regard. I like what they did with the shooting mechanics and the aiming, like in From Russia with Love. I think that's actually a refinement to the shooting in Everything or Nothing. But the level designs are much less interesting. The like Bond moments and like cool shit you can do, set piece nature of it, it's not as good. Like in a way it suffers from being an adaptation, because it's like it's faithful in some regards, but then it just goes completely nuts in a way that is very inconsistent with the tone. It also doesn't have as many fun, cool flourishes of extra like stuff. You know, in Everything or Nothing, there's 30 missions, quote unquote, but some of them are literally just a cutscene of being in Q branch, being introduced to your stealth motorcycle and whatever. And some missions don't have any real action. There's like adventure-y, puzzly bits, and From Russia with Love, it just feels like a lesser game in many ways. It is still great, but like if it hadn't been for Everything or Nothing, I think it would be regarded by many people as the best Bond game. I mean, I think it still is, honestly. But for me, it's not quite on that level. After that, it sort of peters out a little bit, but I would say like you have to go down pretty far to find more of the 3D Bond games. Like Agent Under Fire, I listed as B tier because there's just not much to it. Like, it tries, but it feels very half-baked. It's just not, the execution is not great. PC Nightfire is similar to the console game, but just missing a bunch of stuff, and it's like the levels are twice as long, so it's like kind of tedious. And then of course Rogue Agent, which is just god awful. It's just a bad game. Yeah, for the most part, like a lot of the 3D games are good. I genuinely liked both Everything or not Everything or Nothing, both World's Not Enough games. The PS1 and N64 ones are they have similarities, of course, but they're two distinct games, and they're both good for sure. You know, I'd put it in the same tier as GoldenEye, because I think GoldenEye, I understand that if you really spend a lot of time with GoldenEye, it's a game that grows. It's a game that keeps rewarding you for putting time into it in a way that I can see how some of these others might not. But judged on like playing through the game from beginning to end, GoldenEye is like very uneven. It has some levels that are incredibly frustrating, and it has some mechanics that aren't explained at all, that are very unintuitive and you know, frustrating to deal with. And I think it's a game that like was innovative, but like the whole mission structure stuff I don't think is particularly well executed. It's just like, it was like, in hindsight especially, it's not well executed, because it's like a lot of the mission briefing stuff kind of only makes sense if you have, like, you get information before the level, but then you have to play the level and actually figure it out. And after you've played the level and then revisit it, then you know what to do, and then doing those things are like a fun, like, mechanical sort of, there's more variety than just walking around and shooting. But the game actually does a piss poor job of really explaining and briefing you on these things. That, like, you get the information, but you can only do so much with it, and you have to actually kind of fumble around yourself to figure out what they even meant with that information. And I think that's I have to consider that a bit of a failure on the game's part in like not presenting those things properly. And I think for its time, it was an innovative new kind of idea to try to do that. Having nothing else to compare it to, that I don't think is how it was perceived or received back then. But coming to it now that we've seen like decades worth of iteration on that concept, I think the shortcomings of how GoldenEye handles those things become more glaring. Obviously, I still rank it highly. I don't think it's a bad game, but I think it's a very frustrating game that has a kind of a difficulty curve before you can really get to enjoy it in some ways. It just has a high annoyance factor that kind of drags it down in a way that some of these more higher rated games didn't for me. And yeah, the world's not enough. The N64 one is modeled quite closely after GoldenEye in a lot of ways, and I think it holds up super well. Like, it actually, I think, iterates on some of those things in interesting ways, and it has like just high production values, and I don't know, I think it's a cool game that gets pretty severely overlooked. But having said that, I can see how like maybe grinding it out for collectibles and clearing everything and unlocking stuff and whatever, it might not have the same staying power as GoldenEye, but that's not exactly how I'm judging these games. Like, maybe Quantum of Solace online multiplayer is fucking sick, but like that's not really going to factor in how we judge it. Speaking of, let's go down to the list, and it actually is up to date here. The most recent games before this were some of the mobile games: Casino Royale, Top Agent, James Bond Trivia. I think maybe not in that exact order, but those were the games we played before this, and they're kind of B, C tier. So we're gonna add 360 Quantum of Solace to this list, and after the first stream, I was like, well, does this rise to a C even? Because it just felt so whatever. Not actively bad and frustrating like Rogue Agent by any stretch, but just like not, you know, not bad in any way really, but not good in any way either. And looking at this list and seeing what I've placed these games, like everything on the D tier had quite active frustrations and things that I think were bad. F tier was like, there might have been some good things somewhere, but it was mostly a bad experience. And I think either of those descriptions would have been way too harsh for even the weakest parts of Quantum of Solace. Looking at the C tier, those are games that are more like, well, it was fine, but there was like nothing. It didn't like, you know, it didn't make any splash of any kind. Like, I think so. Looking at this, if I'd only judged the game after the first stream, I think C tier is like quite clearly where it would be at home. But after the second half of the game, that I think was a very substantial upgrade, and part of me is curious to go back and play the game on a higher difficulty level to see if the first stages, because it kind of felt that, yes, some of the level design kind of got more interesting. Like the train level was just a sick level. The casino sneaking around was like kind of cool. Even the poison level was just such a novel experience compared to the rest that it stood out positively. But for the most part, it just feels like, well, the shooting mechanics were always there, but having a bit of a challenge actually makes it interesting. So even the less interesting level from early on, with the added layer of combat challenge, it's very possible that they would show off and like have more of the qualities that I associate with the second half of the game. So taking that into consideration, I think it belongs up here. I think it is quite clearly a step below everything in A tier. But looking at what's in the B tier, especially the most similar games, Agent Under Fire and PC Nightfire, I don't really want to go back and play those games. Because in my memory, like, I'm rewarding these games for doing some cool things, but it's the kind of annoying, tedious aspects of those games that I remember the most. And there was nothing particularly tedious about Quantum of Solace, and it like kind of got good. Now, to be clear, there's no individual rating within each tier. They're just kind of placed mostly chronologically. I think Quantum of Solace has to be a rung below pretty much everything that's in A tier. But I think it's on kind of even footing with these. Like, it might be slightly weaker. Like, it's not the top of B+. But I like it better. Like, that's the thing. It's hard to compare sometimes because some of these games have very high highs and low lows. And Quantum of Solace is definitely, like, more compacted that way. Like, it doesn't really... It had a few, like, sort of standout moments, but they weren't even really, like, that amazing standout moments. But it also didn't have, like, really egregiously, like, oh my god, this fucking level, holy shit, this is awful. Like, you know, the stealth stuff was for the most part, like, very thankfully brief. And even if you fuck up, like, yeah, okay, 5 dudes spawn and you shoot them in half a second and it's kind of over. Like, it's not that big a deal. I think it could very easily have been much, much, much more annoying of a game. And it never getting annoying is, I think, like, beneficial. But, like, yeah, the fact that it kind of improved over time means that, like, I'm more interested in going back and reassessing the early parts of the game, especially with the suspicion that a higher difficulty might actually make it more fun. Some of these other games, it's like by the time you're finished, you're looking back on all the tedious horse shit you had to wander through to get there, that it's like, oh boy, I'm so glad I never have to play this again. And there's, like, no appeal to the idea of playing it again. And I think that's like, not everything B tier below is like that, but a lot of it kind of is. And you know, maybe this isn't strictly like how much would I enjoy playing this a second time. Like, that's not really what I'm ranking here. But if I would enjoy it a second time, I think that automatically kind of bumps it up a little bit. Did the Amiga game get promoted? Asks McCaw. Well, there's more than one Amiga game here. I don't know when you may have seen this list most recently. I have made changes in the sense that I have divided some tiers. So we have a B and B plus, and we have an S and S plus. And we ended up having too many games in the B tier, and I felt that, like, it was S tier started getting a little crowded too, and it was hard to, like, I just needed to split something up to make that distinction, like, or rather, I felt like there was a distinction, and I wanted the tiers to reflect that. So what may have happened is that some games that were previously on the same tier are no longer, because that group got kind of split into two. I don't think I made any retroactive changes larger than that. What may have happened in some other instance is that just by nature of like B plus, for example, I don't know if every game from, like, I think the Duel or Tomorrow Never Dies, like, one of these may have previously been an A, and when B plus started existing, it's like, okay, it actually, like, it feels like it should be below there. Like, it's not necessarily of like with S plus, that's more of a thing of like, these needs to be elevated beyond what's in S. But B plus is, I mean, I call it B plus and not A minus, but it's just a middle step between B and A, really. So as we have added more granularity to the list, it may have resulted in some games kind of moving up and down. But License to Kill and Spy Who Loved Me were always the two Amiga games I thought were like the real standouts. So they were always, I always ranked them highly. And I think the distinction kind of what comes up above here and what's on the same level as those has a lot to do with the scope. Like, License to Kill and Spy Who Loved Me are kind of cool with the multi-stage games and everything, but they're still very small. Like, License to Kill is like a 12-minute game or something. And it's cool to see the breadth of the art and the gameplay and everything within that scope, but it's going to be hard for a game like that to really compete with Everything or Nothing, which is like mega bombastic, but still like very fast-paced and never a boring game. So yeah, again, it just like makes it a little bit difficult to compare. But they made a very strong impact on me, and I have actually gone back and replayed License to Kill. I think I played that for the most recent Best of Nintendo marathon that Goaty hosted the other year, and it was just a really fun game to play through. Like, so for me, as someone who enjoys a short, fun, cool experience that you can come back to, like, that makes me value this game highly. Even if there's like less to it than a game that's like perfectly, or I mean, Casino or Quantum of Solace is a good example. Like, someone might easily say that there's more to this game and it's more involved and it's cooler and whatever than License to Kill, but I'm more inclined to boot up an Amiga emulator to play through License to Kill than this game, I guess. But I think B+ is fair. I think like it's more polished and the shooting is better than The World's Not Enough. But it has too many kind of annoyances that aren't to do with the mechanics of the game. Like, it has the shooting mechanics that are great, but it's so like lacking in every other area. But that part being so competent, you know, brings it pretty high up, because like the shooting is way fucking better than the Agent Under Fire or Nightfire or PC, you know. In fact, I'd say it's better than almost anything on the list. But all these games that have decent shooting typically have a lot of other things about them that are really cool too, and Quantum of Solace just doesn't. But it's competent, so I think that's a fair place for it to end up. And I mean, I would expect, frankly, any 3D action Bond game, if it's like worse than B, that's like, wow, that's like an embarrassment. I mean, just looking at where these games are at, like that's kind of the bar I'm expecting. So relative to that, this is still like a pretty underwhelming score. But compared to my first impression of it, that was like more in C, D territory. Like, yeah, that's a healthy redemption. So these are the games that we have left. There aren't that many of them, right? There's the 3 additional Quantum of Solace games. We've got some GoldenEye remakes. And then Bloodstone, which is the other like proper big console 3D Bond game. License to Drive, which is a very funny title for mobile phones. Top Trumps, The Best of Bond, which is a card game. The updated GoldenEye remake, and then 007 Legends, which I'm like super excited about. It has like a terrible Metacritic rating, but it's just like set piece recreations of Bond action scenes from films. Like, I don't know, I think it's going to be a fun way to close things out. What's up, KDeadPod? Any PSP games? We're not playing anything on PSP, but I know From Russia with Love had a PSP version, but it's basically the same game. So I made the determination that it's not really something we had to play through. I'm not sure if there was anything else on the PSP. There are no PS Vita Bond games because 007 Legends on the Xbox 360 is the final Bond game to be released in 2012. And that's about when the Vita came out. So there haven't really been any Bond games since the Vita launched. Technically, there have been like Android, iOS phone games that are no longer running, so they're not like in this list either. Quantum of Solace getting games, but Casino Royale not, is, I don't know, probably a product of like licensing. I don't know like when EA, like how long they had the license, because they put out, I guess GoldenEye Rogue Agent was the last EA Bond game, because I don't know if they were involved in any of the cell phone stuff. I think that was like Sony, because they were involved in like the movie stuff or whatever. And it's very possible that EA had the rights to do Bond stuff for several years afterwards, but never released anything. You you know, EA famously canceled like 45 Star Wars games without ever doing much with that for some time, you know, at one point. So there could have been something similar with that. Like Activision might have, like, I don't know when Activision would have gotten the rights such that they would start development on the Quantum of Solace games. But Rogue Agent came out in 2005, and Casino Royale, the film, was in 2006. So even if EA's license expired right as Rogue Agent came out, if Activision had picked up the license at that time, it probably would have been quite difficult for them to release something in time for Casino Royale's release. So I would imagine that that played a big part in it. Because, yeah, I think, like, movie tie-in games were certainly a thing. There was no console game for, what's it called? The Last Brosnan one? Die Another Day. But they, you know, because they were working on Agent Under Fire and then Nightfire, like they were doing their other shit kind of around that time, which is probably was just like easier to not have to deal with the, you know, timing it with the movie release and everything. So EA was probably like, fuck it, we don't necessarily care about the movies coming out. We can just do this on our own schedule. And I guess Activision kind of did the same after Quantum of Solace. This is all speculation, but I mean, that would kind of make sense to me as well. So I'm actually very excited for Bloodstone, because so far, like, Agent Under Fire was a bit undercooked, but Nightfire and Everything or Nothing were both awesome. And like, it's exciting to get this like original Bond story. And that's what we're getting with Bloodstone. So I'm looking forward to that. But even GoldenEye, like, that's kind of the opposite, where it's like a familiar thing, but we get to see like this totally new take on it. I say totally new, but it's probably, I'm gonna assume that they're leaning a lot more on the N64 game than the movie, because the GoldenEye game has like a lot of kind of departures from the film. It's not exactly well regarded necessarily, but it doesn't bother me. I'm still interested in seeing what it's like. But yeah, I expect a base level of competency of these 3D Bond games for sure. And we'll see if any of them exceed those expectations or turn out to be surprisingly garbage. But yeah, we're kind of in the home stretch. So hopefully we'll properly finish this in time for the new game whenever that shows up. So let me hide my screen while I do this. I will save this. James Bond tier list, April 26th, 2025. So let me just save this. The website wants to cooperate. There we go. And if you want to take a look, I guess I can just share a link here in chat. And I will post this on Discord later. So if you would like, if you like me have played some 40, 50 James Bond video games and want to rank them, or just rank the ones you have played, you can create your own list using this template. I made it for myself, but if you want to use it, feel free to go ahead. But there we go. That was an extensive spreadsheet session, but I'm glad we could dedicate the proper time and effort to this, because I have felt bad about being a little hasty in skipping over some of this previously. Now, with that, I've been live for a bit over 3 hours, so it's more than high time for me to take a break. I shall be doing so, and when I return, we will continue with... let's see here. Mission number 40, Quantum of Solace for the PlayStation 2. So without further ado, I will hop on over to a break scene and I'll be back before too long. See you guys in a bit.